OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Bang on 7:30 this morning. You're welcome along to OTB AM. It's Ger Gilroy and Owen Sheehan with you all the way through until 10 a.m. this morning. We'd love to hear from you. 087 9180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Of course, you can always just use the hashtag OTBAM on Twitter. You can leave a message for us on our Instagram account, on Facebook, on YouTube, whatever your chosen platform is. And of course, the best way to consume us these days is on the OTB Sports app, which we just launched a couple of months ago and is going gangbusters. So get out there, tell your friends, rate us in the App Store and get on board, because that train is leaving town. Now, a very busy programme for you between now and 10 o'clock. Feature-length interview with Micheál Ó Muircheartaigh coming your way at 9:15. Deal or no deal with Phil Egan. But the bulk of today's show is a 35-minute interview with Cyrus Christie, which we recorded yesterday. A bit of a rollercoaster season for everybody involved in football, obviously. From Cyrus Christie's perspective, it finishes with a playoff final victory and summer off, 5 or 6 weeks off, and then obviously preparing for life in the Premier League again. So we'll talk to him about that. We'll talk to him about the championship final, the biggest game in world football, and the extra little motivation that they needed, courtesy of a small bit of trash talking from their rivals in that final. We'll also talk to him about his career with the Republic of Ireland, which has unfortunately been somewhat overshadowed by various racist incidents. A lot of it happened online. Certainly that's the stuff that we'd heard about before today. Unfortunately today we get some details of other stuff that's happened, horrific details of incidents that have happened to Cyrus Christie while training with the Republic of Ireland. So that's coming your way. Fairly harrowing stuff at around about 8:15 this morning. We're going to talk about Ronnie O'Sullivan's comeback, which was not predicted really by anybody other than Shane yesterday on the show. A sensational victory for Ronnie O'Sullivan, and maybe he was playing a different game from the rest of us. We'll also talk about the Celtic story and the current cessation of hostilities in the SPL. That's all coming a little bit later on in the show. But first, we're going to hear from... Actually, we're going to hear from about that right now. Kevin Doyle was on the football show last night. Owen was presenting, and Robert Grieve, chief football writer of the Scottish Sun, discussing why the new football season in Scotland is in disarray. Have a look.
It has been a fairly turbulent few days for Scottish football, to say the least. 3 games have now been postponed in the Premiership up there. 3 further games, I should say. Celtic's game against St Mirren and Aberdeen's fixture against Hamilton, both due to be played tomorrow night, are now going to be rescheduled. And Celtic versus Aberdeen on Saturday has also been postponed. Now, this is because Celtic player Bolly Bolingoli took a trip to Spain and failed to self-isolate upon his return. He then went on to line out, came off the bench and played against Kilmarnock on Sunday. Last week then, you will have seen the story that 2 Aberdeen players tested positive for COVID-19, and then a further 6 were forced to self-isolate because they came into close contact with these 2 cases, and it was reported that the 8 of them were in a bar in Aberdeen after their match with Rangers. Their game against St Johnstone last weekend was subsequently postponed. So, to say that the Celtic situation has thrown fuel on this fire is putting it lightly, and we are going to be joined by Robert Grieve of the Scottish Sun in just a moment. But let's hear what some of the main figures in this story have been saying over the past little while. And we're going to start with Scotland's National Clinical Director, Professor Jason Leach, who says that the players in the Scottish Premiership who have broken coronavirus rules have risked the health of the public and also risked the return of other elite sports.
I spent 45 minutes with the captains and managers of our clubs. I'm a fan as well as the National Clinical Director, and I told them of their responsibility, but actually, more importantly than that, I told them of the dangers of the virus. They put at risk 2 things. They put at risk principally the health of the population, irrespective of if you're a footballer, a factory worker, a school teacher, or whoever you are. If you break the guidance, you put at risk your own health and the health of your loved ones. That's the most important thing for the footballers to understand. But they have an added responsibility because they put at risk the return of elite sport, not just their own sport, but golf, horse racing, rugby, swimming, everything else. We've designed a bubble system because they are privileged. They are getting to do extra things that the rest of the population aren't, and they have put that at risk. So I hope you can hear in my voice how disappointed I was yesterday to hear of another. It's not just this one player, it's a series of breaches now that we have to get the SPFL and the SFA and the clubs to address. It's not my job to address them. I think our guidance and our rules are crystal clear, and they were made clear to them again last night. So I look forward to them coming with what that solution will be over the next week.
OK, so that is Scotland's National Clinical Director, Professor Jason Leach. Now let's hear from Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. She's been speaking about this, and she says that the footballers haven't lived up to their responsibilities.
This is just not acceptable. You know, we're asking members of the public, every day I stand here and ask members of the public to make huge sacrifices in how they live their lives. And the vast majority of members of the public are doing that, and it's not easy. We can't have privileged football players just deciding that they're not going to bother. So this can't go on. What we're going to do about it? Well, let me say, first of all, I want to get to a situation here where clubs and players live up to their responsibilities, because I don't want the price of this to be paid by fans who want to watch football, even although they can't go as normal to spectate in stadiums. And I don't want the price of this to be paid by football players and clubs who are living up to their responsibilities. So there have been talks ongoing over the course of the morning. Jason has been part of those talks with the football authorities, where we've given them the opportunity to tell us how they are going to put their house in order and make sure that these breaches don't happen, or when they do, that there are very clear penalties in place for players and for clubs. We will hopefully say more about the outcome of those talks later on this afternoon. I don't want the season to be in jeopardy for the reasons I've just set out. I don't want people who are not responsible for this to pay the price. But we have to be very clear, this situation is not acceptable.
Yeah, Nicola Sturgeon there talking about the whole situation. Finally, let's wrap up with the audio by hearing from Neil Lennon, Celtic manager. He says they've been let down by Ballyballingolly.
We played Hamilton in the opening game of the season. We gave the players a couple of days off after. It had been a heavy week that week. And we made it clear to the players that they weren't to leave Glasgow. Unbeknownst to us, until yesterday, Ballingolly took a flight to Spain on the Monday and then flew back in on the Tuesday. The one day in Spain, there's no logic in that. And then decided to keep it to himself, didn't tell anybody, trained all week, put everybody at risk in this bubble that we've created here. And then obviously was part of the squad, played on Sunday, put everybody at risk, the Kilmarnock players as well, Kilmarnock staff. And then obviously the story broke yesterday, and then he came clean, and we were absolutely livid, appalled. The club have been at the forefront of maintaining good practice, the protocols all in place, trying to get the game up and running, and we have been bitterly and sorely let down by the selfish actions of one individual.
Yeah, Neil Lennon there, livid, to say the very least. Scottish Sun chief football writer Robert Grieve is with us. Robert, thanks a million for taking the call. How are you doing?
I'm very well, how are you?
Not too bad, thanks. I think Neil Lennon did a pretty good job of breaking down the Ballingolly situation there. What more can you tell us about what's happening at the moment?
Well, yeah, I think Neil Lennon pretty much hit it in the head this afternoon. He did his broadcast press conference, and then the Daily guys, myself included, spoke to him afterwards, and I genuinely can't remember hearing him as angry as he was today. Really let down by Ballingolly, and I think just completely flabbergasted by the situation. You can ask yourself, what more can Celtic do? What more can any club do when they make it perfectly clear to their players what the situation is? These guys are, as Neil says, in a bubble. They have been for weeks now, and Scottish football is desperate to get going, and has done a week ago. And yet things like this happen. It kind of beggars belief. But again, as I say, speaking to Neil this afternoon, I can't remember him as being as angry as he is. And I think just disappointed and absolutely stunned by it.
This was the fear that some people would have had before football returned. It was a fear that people had of Premier League footballers in England, that they would breach protocol because a few of them had done during lockdown. And in fairness, people hit back to that and said, this is unfair. It is unfair to say that Premier League footballers will not hold up their end of the bargain. That went off without a hitch. Unfortunately, the whole idea of footballers misbehaving is not going to be helped whatsoever by what we've seen from Aberdeen and from Celtic over the last little while. So Bolingoli gets a day or two off, basically. All the players get a day or two off, and he decides to go to Spain for, 24 hours, and then doesn't inform anybody when he gets home. It's one of the more bizarre decisions we've seen from an individual at this point, and you do suspect that Neil Lennon won't be giving many personal responsibilities out to players in future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you touched on there, a week ago, we had 8 Aberdeen players following their game against Rangers, going out on the town, having a meal and then going for some drinks. Now, that was stupidity, gross stupidity. But this is on a different level. This is a guy who's going abroad and doesn't seem to have any kind of no thought for anyone else apart himself. You know, he doesn't care about the consequences. I think the Aberdeen guys, as much as it was a gross mistake from them, I think it was just stupidity. This goes way beyond that. Neil Lennon, as he touched on today, puts it down to that. He doesn't just write this off as a daft football player. This is a guy who made a conscious decision. He was going to go abroad for 24 hours with his girlfriend or a female friend of his, and to hell with the rest of it. And suddenly Celtic, who are completely and utterly unaware of the situation until my newspaper, the Scottish Sun, went to Celtic with us last night, is unaware. And he's now having to face the music this afternoon. I don't think there's any way back for Bolingoli after this. This is a guy with 3 years left in his contract at Celtic. It cost him well over £2 million. He made 14 appearances last season. He's done next to nothing to justify his place at Celtic, and then he's done this. As I say, it beggars belief. I don't know how Celtic deal with it, how they can get through this situation, but they have to deal with it. As you touched on as well, Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish Government, they've got their eyes on Scottish football right now, and quite rightly so. They've given Scottish football considerable leeway to get back playing, and there's clubs who are delighted to be back playing because it's keeping the wheels from the door. But then something like this happens. The Aberdeen won last week, and this is even worse. You scratch your head and kind of wonder about players sometimes and what goes through their mind. But for this one, it's really hard to fathom.
How do Celtic and Aberdeen both get on the pitch again? How do we get out of this, and what happens next?
Well, they just have to. I think they have to take their medicine just now. They're not playing. Celtic were meant to be playing St Mirren tomorrow. That's off, and then coincidentally, the teams Aberdeen and Celtic were meant to be playing against each other at the weekend. Again, game off. Celtic's next game's a European match. Between the last game and that, we're looking at 10 days without having kicked a ball. Neil Lennon, I know for a fact, isn't happy about that either. But they have to take their medicine. There's nothing Celtic can complain about on this. Any other Scottish club that's caught up in this, they have to take their medicine. As I say, Nicola Sturgeon, I think, has been relatively fair. I think there was people listening to her address to the nation this afternoon at lunchtime, wondering if she might actually take the decision to actually call it off here and now. She hasn't done that. She's basically called it off for a week, but it could have been a lot worse. But I tell you what, if things don't change now with the players all around the country who think they can do what they like, then this is just going to happen again. But it is worth stressing that the vast majority of players, I think, are actually going ahead with the rules. They are listening to what's been said. And these are the guys you have to think about, because they're the ones that are suffering just now. St Mirren have done nothing wrong. Their game tomorrow's off. So there has to be a change in mentality with players. But maybe this, hopefully this will be the kind of final wake-up call. We thought it was going to be after the Aberdeen incident last week that the penny would drop with players. Hopefully this is the one that is going to happen.
Sturgeon has made the point that this is now the yellow card for football, that one more incident and it will be a red card. The whole thing will be scuppered. And the problem here, Robert, is that what we've had, as you put it, are two instances of stupidity. One is more stupid than the other, but they are both instances of stupidity. What happens if there is an accidental occurrence or an outbreak or a few extra cases that come not out of bad faith, but out of pure accident, out of the fact that figures are rising all around the world and in Scotland once again? Does that also mean that the red card will be shown to Scottish football, that if there is even an inkling of football causing a few new cases, that the whole thing will be scuppered?
I would argue against that. There was an incident at St Mirren a couple of weeks ago when, through a call centre, one of the backroom staff at St Mirren, a wife or girlfriend works in the call centre, and it got into St Mirren and they had a bit of an incident they had to deal with. That's no one's fault. That's going to happen. Whether players are in a bubble or not, they go home, they've got wives, they've got girlfriends who are interacting with the community, the wider community. They've got kids who are going to be going to school this week. So there's every chance that this could happen again, but it's a different ball game when guys are going to pubs and where guys are jumping on a plane and going to Malaga for 24 hours just because they feel like it. That's a different ball game. That's why Nicola Sturgeon is furious with this, and understandably. It's a different argument, it's a different situation if players are actually just caught up in it because they're caught up in it and they can't do anything about it. I think that she would take a different view of it, albeit if there's another wave of this that hits Scotland beyond Aberdeen, then it's going to be problematic for Scottish football because games will inevitably be called off. But I don't think Nicola Sturgeon or the Scottish Government will have the same dim view if it's because of circumstances. I think it's because of the way this has come about, because players basically deciding to hell with it, I'm going to do what I like. And that's where she's got a problem with it. And as I say, you can't argue with that. Scottish football has been given real leeway to get back going again. Clubs were arguing desperately to get back going again, and it's been given the go-ahead. We're still hoping that we can get fans back into the stadiums in the next month, in September. Whether or not that happens now, I would very much doubt it. I think that might be pushed down the road. But there's no doubt that the government now has a firm view in Scottish football, a close eye on it, and it's right to do so.
That's the key thing here, isn't it? That everything else gets pushed back a little bit. Supporters in grounds in a month, Robert. Speaking honestly, it looks like that's a fairly far-fetched idea given what we've seen over the last few days. But also how other elite sports bodies in Scotland must be looking at this would be very interesting as well. Like, we'd be paying particular interest to the Scottish teams in the Pro 14 and a potential Pro 14 final coming down the line between an Irish province and a Scottish province. Scottish rugby, other Scottish sports must be looking at the privileged situation that Scottish football have found themselves in and must really be fearing what happens to them if Scottish football does get put the brakes on it.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, I think Nicola Sturgeon touched on that today when she spoke about how, well, she meant, I think in fact it was Jason Leach who mentioned that the clinical director who was talking about how Scottish football has been given dispensation, and it's because and the other sports are watching that because they're wanting to go ahead to start. So it isn't just about Scottish football, it's about Scottish golf, it's about swimming, every other rugby, every other sport in the country who's wanting to get going again. So absolutely, it's crucial that Scottish football does the best it can for itself, but also for other sports. There are wider issues, of course. I mean, we've got pubs that are open. Aberdeen, I've got an outbreak, and our pubs open. So we're talking about getting fans back into stadiums, which is what we all want. And as you say, we think the can's been kicked down the road a little bit, and that because of this. But equally, if we're letting hundreds of people inside pubs to watch games on TV, then I do question why we can't have fans inside stadiums, even if it is socially distanced. I think that is something that could happen. I would argue that fans and people are actually safer in stadiums than they would be in a pub, but that's a different argument. But absolutely, other sports will be looking at what's going on with Scottish football, and they'll probably be shaking their heads because we're in week 2, and already we've had two major incidents, and you just wonder the consequences of what will happen if there's another incident anytime soon.
On a purely football level, to finish up then, Robert, if this were all to be halted over the next little while, then there is the purely practical level of footballers who don't have any football to play. There are targets that Premier League clubs, the Championship clubs have within Scotland. And if those footballers aren't allowed to play because of the stupid decisions of a few individuals elsewhere in the league, and they're sitting on their hands, I mean, there could be a mini exodus from the league as well. There are just a multitude of problems that could be presented if Sturgeon does follow up with this and the red card is shown to Scottish football.
There's a multitude of situations with it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's clubs. I was in contact with a chief executive of one of the Premiership clubs this morning, who was terrified about what was going to come out of Nicola Sturgeon's mouth because of that. A club that's done nothing wrong, a club that's paying, I believe, £6,000 every week to test their players, and yet they were worried about the prospect of Scottish football having its doors closed. I mean, that's not fair in that club, but it'll be the same throughout the country. Clubs who are doing everything they possibly can to get through this, to keep the doors open, and they'll be terrified right now. So absolutely, it's something which will worry people, and understandably so. Will there be an exodus of players? I think if you're a footballer at a club right now, you will be worried. You may have a contract, but you'll be thinking, what's going to happen next? So absolutely, there's definitely anxious times for Scottish football right now, but it has to help itself. There's a pandemic going on in the world which is so uncertain that a lot of it we can't do anything about, but players can at least stay in the house. They can at least follow the rules and help themselves. And until that happens, Scottish football is going to be a problem.
The League of Ireland's success is important to all of football in Ireland, not just to those people who go and attend and are supporters of League of Ireland teams. It is the fact that they should be what we're looking at. We shouldn't be looking at teams, at young teenagers going into academies or going on loan to lower division clubs in England. If people want to pave their way to the top, you'd hope that the League of Ireland can actually be a real stepping stone for them, like it was for you.
Yeah, and it has been for a lot of players since, thankfully. There was, the last Euros 2016, I remember I wasn't in the squad, but the picture of the load of lads together who come through the League of Ireland. So I hope that pays off, lads, watching that then. It's in your brain and it's creating another pathway for people. It should be, in the majority of cases, the way to do it. You should have confidence enough that one of your local League of Ireland teams, I'd have Wexford FC now over the road for me. If I was 16, I can go through there, and get good coaching at Wexford FC and, get into their team. And then maybe if they're in League One in Ireland, get up to the Premier Division, and try attract wherever, one the Cork City or whatever, Waterford, or try get up and go step by step by step. And I was lucky, I suppose, very lucky that Mick Wallace took an interest in me, Pat Dolan took an interest in me, and that was they envisioned that route for me, and I did as well. And I had a plan. I had a plan when I was 18 that I was going to give this a deferred college. I was going to give this a real good go till I was 22. I gave myself a sort of a cut-off. 22. If I can't play to a highish level in the League of Ireland, I'm not going to be able to make it in England. So that was my game. Short-term goals every year, try to get a little bit better, and it's difficult to do that, because you're under a lot of pressure, and everyone's saying what you're doing, and are you ever going to make a living out of this? Or, you're under a lot of pressure as a young player at that age to focus on it and try make the most of your career. But it's the best of the options, I think, currently out there of any Irish player. And it'd be better for the League of Ireland in all cases. You get better players playing, younger players, exciting league, and you see those players move on then and hopefully have success abroad, and you can follow them. If they do move on, the club hopefully gets well compared to now when they get basically pittance for a lot of players, get better remuneration, can build a club. And the League of Ireland is never going to be the Premier League, so you just have to get the best of what we can do, and I think that route suits everyone. Better product for everyone, better product for TV. It becomes better all around. It's sort of happening. I think I'd be quite positive about it, and any League of Ireland game I've done or watched or been to has been a really good experience for me, to be honest with you, in the last couple of years. I think it's a better product than it would have been when I was in it. The facilities, the pitches seem better. Just keeping it going. I know we're dragging on here a bit about it, but there's just so many bad news stories every year. There's always a club or always something, and it just drags the perception of it down. It's in the national paper about a club going bust or another. You can basically tell at the start of the season, a club that shouldn't be spending a load of money is spending a load of money and signing all these players, and well, that's going to go bust in 6 months, and it does go bust. You'd love it to sort itself out a little bit better, and people just to be a little clever, a bit more intelligent about how the whole thing is run, because it is a fantastic experience to play in it. First of all, as a professional, Friday nights in the League of Ireland, I loved it. I loved the underlights. Great atmosphere for me down in Cork City, and what a way to start your professional career. And if you get to go on and move to England or wherever, fantastic. If not, you've got a good club to play for, and a great experience as a young professional.
Before you move on, what was the college course that you deferred? What was that sliding door that you just introduced?
Business studies. You know what? It was just one of them ones I ticked. I was in UCD. And it was just one of those ones I ticked. It was an easy one. Looking back, I have a massive fascination with flight and planes and helicopters, so I'd have probably ended up doing something on that route. But at the time, that was tick a box. I'm going to do business studies, and it was what good few of my family had done, so I was just following that route. Right, Sunderland and business studies, the two big sliding doors in your life, Kevin. We wanted to chat to you a little bit about transfers as well, because it's been a fairly hectic week on the transfers front, or transfers that potentially won't happen as well. The Jadon Sancho situation, probably the most high-profile saga, and it is officially a saga at this point, and it could rumble on for a little while.
We're just interested in getting your memories of this time of year, because I'd imagine at a player, especially at your peak in the Premier League, it's an interesting time to be sitting around knowing that there are stories being written about you that are simply untrue, or rumours that are being pushed out there that are simply untrue. Did you pay much attention to that sort of thing when you were at your peak in the Premier League?
Depend who it was. You know what? Sometimes you see a story and you know it was lies. I'm trying to think of one. I don't know. I'm trying to think. You'd know, like, where did they just come from? And other times you'd see a story and you'd like, God, where have they got that one from? How have they? There is a bit of truth in it. I didn't like. You'd be sort of excited for the transfer window. I didn't really like it though, because you just didn't know. You literally were at the whim of the club. Realistically, unless you were, going to put your foot down in any particular way. But really, if a club wants to sell you, you just end up going, pretty much, because what's the point in hanging around if they want to get rid of you? That was always my opinion. So, or if you wanted to go and they didn't want to sell you, I know, for example, Reading, I suppose we got relegated from Reading. I was only there a few years at the time, and they'd told me you can leave for a figure which was, I think it was around 8 million at the time. You can leave, someone bids 8 million, and Aston Villa at the time bid 8 million, or said they'd bid 8 million, and Reading said, okay, we've changed our mind. We said we wanted more than 8 million for you. So what's more than 8 million? Like, so it was sort of, it was be frustrating. But again, it's not the end of the world, is it? And I used to think it like that. Well, they want to keep me, so that's a good sign. And they're a good club, and that was my I never, different moves over the years, I never threw my toys out of pram. Just got on with it. It's more your family, and my wife in my case, and you might have just moved into a new apartment or a new house, and then we might be moving. There was one time I nearly went to Celtic at the last minute. There was another time I nearly went. Yeah, just loads of things over the years. You nearly go here, there, and everywhere. I remember getting a phone call about going to a certain club on the last day of the transfer window again at Reading, and they were like, we can't get in touch with the club, but the club had arranged for the chief executive and the chief scout and the manager to have all their phones turned off for the whole day of transfer deadline day, so no one could get them, because they knew there might be they knew there might be movement. So listen, it happens at every club. It happens to nearly every player. You hear some stories, you don't hear others, but you sort of get used to it as you get older. And it's just part of the job.
2010, you were linked with Juventus and with Arsenal. Was there any truth to either of those rumours?
The Juventus one, I don't know. Trapattoni was sort of involved with Juventus, and I think he might have been recommending me to them at the time, but I didn't hear anything from them. Arsenal one was, they were inquired about me to Wolves, and Wolves, I think, just said no, we're not selling them, and that Steve Morgan is a rich owner, and I wasn't that. I was only at Wolves a year, so, and club was building onto the stadium at the time, and so it wasn't. I suppose I should have been more obviously looking to move, but things were going quite well for me, and I was like, okay, you don't want to sell me, great. There were club ambition at the time, and I was happy to stay, and I'd only moved there a year, so. That's my personality. Other players would be, I suppose, different, and maybe I should have. Looking back, you push for these things more, but you can't force anyone to pay money for you either if they inquired and they were told no, and that's the end of it. So it's just the way it is.
The end of your Wolves stint, then, is that something that you look back on and say that they could have perhaps treated you better in that situation? I think that, did it get to a stage where they were trying to offload you? But I think it might have been because they got relegated a couple of times, and essentially they just couldn't afford to keep everybody on the payroll. Yeah,
it was. You know what? It was. I suppose if it was just me, I'd have been more upset about the whole thing. But there was probably 6 or 7 of us. We were training on what was, we'd walk into the training ground and there'd be a big whiteboard telling, first team, under 21s, reserves, and pitch 3 to be up the far end of the whiteboard to say the 7 of us at the time. It went on for a few months, and I didn't feel any animosity towards at the time. It was the way they were moving forward, and you understood. Listen, we were, I suppose, Premier League wages, and after getting relegated twice, you could understand why they're trying to get rid of us. And we trained at 1:30 every day, and we'd be driving into training when everyone else would be driving out and waving at us. But you learn to go with it. That was for a whole pre-season, and I knew I was leaving. I knew I was going on loan anyway, so I just made the most of it, did my training, and And got on with it. And there was no one treating me badly as such. They were just treating me differently. We changed in the referees' changing room, I think, in the training ground. But it was still had hot showers and we still got food. It wasn't the end of the world.
I think Stephen Ward was in that seven.
It's such a good relationship. It was a bit. I was a bit sad how that was, but I actually ended up going on loan and coming back and spending the last 6 months there and actually finishing off involved in the first team. So we ended on good terms.
Stephen Ward was in that cohort of 7 as well, was he?
Yeah, Stephen Ward and Kevin Foley, Roger Johnson, Jamie O'Hara, a couple of lads from France, a lad from Denmark. We had a right five-a-side, in fairness. And we actually trained hard, we worked hard because all of us knew we were moving on and we had to be fit and move on. And it wasn't, it was a shock for the first few days, getting used to it. But once we got into routine, we did our pre-season like that. And I think nearly all of us, a couple got left behind for maybe 6 months, but nearly all of us moved on.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports in your pocket. Listen to OTB Sports Radio 24/7.
Until that habit is broken, do you not realise how crazy those things were?
Watch your favourite OTB videos.
The benefit of being suspended, me and Scholesy were out every night, a couple of nights before the game.
Read all the latest sports news and opinions, all in one place, the OTB Sports app. Listen, watch, read. Wherever you are, we're always with you. The OTB Sports app, available to download now from your app store.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
So if you just joined us, you missed 2 great interviews. Robert Grieve, the chief football writer with the Scottish Sun, talking about the absolute carnage that is sorry, I can't say that now without thinking of the World Cup and Breffni. What a distraction to have so quickly off the top, Owen. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it's you pronounced carnage wrong, but got out of the throw back.
I was halfway through it and I was like, that's not how you're supposed to say that. Oh, hang on, that's just how we say it when we're making a joke. Oh, it's too late. It is absolute carnage in Scottish football at the moment, and that was Robert Grieve a little bit earlier speaking with you, and then Kevin Doyle in great form talking about life at Wolves and transfer deadline day. Our podcast subscribers are going, what the hell are they talking about? Every morning we start this show at 7:30. Get out of bed and stick us on the OTB Sports app. Click the radio button and the show is live. For those of you who've been with us from 7:30, then you've got some good quality stuff and you've realised that Owen Sheehan is the hardest working man in show business.
I appreciated the opportunity to get out of bed later yesterday. I was like, my bio clock is in such a good position that I will not even set an alarm before doing the PM shift, and I will get up at 8 or 9 o'clock. Get up early. My bio clock will have me up. Catch the end of OTB AM maybe with Ger and Shane. Go for a run. Have a nice leisurely breakfast, and then check in with the lads at around 11, half 11. Woke up at midday yesterday.
Wow.
And all that was put. I think that was more thanks to Colin Morikawa and an exciting USPGA championship that I was a little bit tired after Sunday. But yeah, so it was actually not worthwhile at all. I actually just ended up staying up late again last night watching NBA. So kind of made up for it a little bit.
And all the house parties you've been at this weekend, obviously.
Of course, I am the vector.
There's a lot going on today, and we've got a lot to talk about. There's a breaking story overnight. The Longford GAA champions have been kicked out of the championship. Indeed, the whole club has been kicked out of all activities with regards to putting teams forward for competition. Obviously, they can still train and function as a club, but they can't play any matches. Emmett Og Kilo, the Longford champions, have been banned for 48 weeks from GAA competitions. That, I believe, is their chairman, the chairman of the club. Now, that's Jerry Hagan there. He's the chairman of the Kilo Emmett Og Club, which is the best club out there, the team who are the defending champions in the senior championship. They've been kicked out for, it seems like a fairly weird scenario here. It's about a €750 fine that was imposed by the Longford GAA Hearings Committee back in February, and that was subject to an appeal by Emmett Og. 48 weeks for non-payment of a €750 fine. GAA justice is on a par with the 3 strikes and you're going to prison forever in America. You know, where they pop people for like a little a dime bag of weed, and then you get done again, you're like, okay, you're going to prison forever without parole. That's kind of what this 48 weeks for the 750 quid seems like. Is it a little bit excessive, Owen?
It seems to be for a €750 fine. What like the specific incident for an underage game, an under-16 game, and the non-payment of the fine. This has obviously been something that's gone on for a little while in Longford. It's actually astonishing to read about a controversial situation in GAA at the moment that doesn't involve coronavirus. This is something entirely separate.
I wonder, is the fact that coronavirus kicked in one of the reasons why this all hasn't been sorted out by now, why the fine and the ban haven't been handed out and the subsequent appeal heard, and it would all been kind of a week-long thing that would have got quite a lot of national attention when the county champions are being banned from all competitions for 48 weeks. And then you start to dig into it and you're like, oh, this is like one of those fairly interesting local GAA rows that happen and makes you think, what's going on here? So the fine follows on from a sanction. This is all from the Longford Leader. The fine follows on from a sanction after an investigation by the Longford CCC into just one team appearing at the County Under-16A final on the 5th of January this year between Killaloe and St Colmcille's St Francis. So obviously it's an Under-16 final. Both teams were supposed to be there, but the game didn't proceed. Only one side togged out, and it wasn't Killaloe. Am I pronouncing Killaloe right? Do you know? St Colmcille's St Francis togged out. Killaloe didn't, and apparently before the game, Killaloe said that they wouldn't be fulfilling the fixture because an investigation into another issue relating to the same competition hadn't been dealt with. So obviously they felt something untoward had happened, and as a result they wouldn't be playing in the match. And because they didn't play in the match, they got fined, and because they got fined, they wouldn't pay the fine. And now the whole club has been kicked out of the championship. GAA justice is hard. It's hard and heavy. I mean, you could, like, commit fairly egregious assault in some matches. We'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks. We've seen people stamp on people and not get banned for this long.
It does strike me as a situation where a book has been thrown at a team here, but the book has obviously been followed to the nth degree. So sometimes when these sort of archaic rules exist, or these rules that maybe exist for the sake of it, they can seem very, very weird when they actually exist in practice, when they actually are applied. And you wonder if much thought was given to this before such a big ban was actually handed out. Was there any nuance available here at all? Was there any room for manoeuvre, any discussion available at all? So, 48 weeks for anything is extremely excessive. 48 weeks for, as you say, perhaps assault for one player may seem like a suitable
about right
ban,
yeah.
But that is like the very top end of things for an under-16 fixture essentially here, for the entire club to then be banned from competitions for 48 weeks does seem remarkable. It really does. I'd like to know what exactly the rule is that's been applied here.
They were due to pay the fine before the end of July, and this was subject to an appeal to the Leinster GAA Hearings Committee, but then that committee wasn't able to hear the appeal because of COVID, and the championship started. They played, and apparently they beat Clongish last Friday night, and then the Longford GAA Hearings Committee, they were able to hear, and they did sit, and they recommended a 48-week suspension. So all competitive activity is now at a standstill until an appeal for that 48 weeks ban is heard by the GAA Hearings Committee. A remarkable story. And the chairman of Killaloe, Emmett Ogue, and the Longford GAA Central Council delegate, which is, obviously kind of quite important, he said the club will be appealing the suspension and stressed that it will need to be dealt with as a matter of urgency because obviously they want to get back to playing. But what caused the initial issue at the under-16 level? That's what's going to be very interesting here. Like what's the Patrick Kavanagh line about from such a local dispute? Homer wrote the Iliad. What was that about? There was some nonsensical local club row. Patrick Kavanagh, hang on a second. If I pick at this enough, it's going to turn into the Iliad and the Odyssey. Homer was able to do it. Now Homer was obviously actually talking about like rows between two massive, important, historic empires, and we're talking about an under-16 game. Look,
I mean, Killow/Killu, however we're going with this, and St. Columkille's St. Francis are two dynastic modern versions of what Homer would have referred to in the Iliad, I'm sure. Like I just can picture the initial incident here where you've got an under-16 game where one of the teams and the refs and all the officials are togged out, and then the other team just isn't there. And the surprise that must have struck all those players at the time, thinking, do we just get a walkover here, or what's the situation here? So, God, it's a very interesting situation. And as you say, you got to go back a step before that to see what was the specific issue that the club had that meant that they didn't field the team on that night, because it's another issue entirely that sparked that.
Yeah, so, and all of a sudden it's going to be part of the national spotlight, because not that much for a lot of the GAA journalists to do apart from talking about club games, and now all of a sudden a big juicy scandal, 48 weeks, a county champions kicked out, and we get to see GAA administration under the microscope again. If you want to get involved in the conversation this morning, 0879 180 180 is the number. Here's what's coming up on the show. A very, very busy show for you today. An exclusive with Cyrus Christie is coming your way in just 5 minutes' time. It's about half an hour, and we recommend that you sit and listen to this, because a lot of important stuff gets discussed in it. We'll talk about the Championship playoff final and what that actually means and his hopes for Premier League football next year. But we'll also talk about what it's like to be a person of colour representing the Republic of Ireland football team. And you can't but come away from this interview pretty shocked, I think, by some of the stuff that Cyrus Christie has experienced while training with Ireland, while speaking with the Gardaí about the incidents that he's actually suffered through while playing and training with Ireland, and really the chronic lack of understanding about his situation. Micheál Ó Muircheartaigh is going to join us about 9:15 to talk to us. We're going to pose the question anyway with Micheál: how the hell are we supposed to rate one era versus another? Here's a man who has pretty much seen and lived through all of the GAA action for the last 80 odd years, where he's been looking at it going, we must keep some analysis of this. So we get his thoughts on that, and then Deal or No Deal with Phil Egan to round out the show. Shane is here. Shane, how are you?
Not too bad, lads. Keeping well, and yourselves?
I mean, it's one of those mornings where you think, it's going to be quiet this morning, and then it is not quiet.
No, there's a lot happening, isn't there? And we even got to talk about Breffney's carnage this morning on OTB AM, so delighted to hear that this morning.
You, I think, were not sure, but where you were giving Ronnie a good chance of winning yesterday, and lo and behold, your boy came through.
Yeah, I gave him a little bit of hope, and to be fair, he was 7-2 down, he was 8-4 down, looked in all sorts of trouble against Mark Williams, but his afternoon session yesterday was extraordinary. He won at 6-2, and he needed to win at 6-2. He won the last 4 frames as well. Really impressive. And Williams didn't play badly, so that says where Ronnie's game is at the moment. He's got Mark Selby up in the semi-finals later on today, so that'll be the real test. I think the winner of that will go on to win the tournament. Is
that a best of 25? Is this where it gets quite serious in terms of like...
The second round and the quarterfinal were best of 25. This is best of 33, so it's actually first to 17, so it's fairly in-depth, a long one.
And it'll be over 2 days, is that right?
Yeah, it could be over 3 days actually, and then the final is on Saturday and Sunday, so we're in for it over the next few days. Plenty of snooker, you'll be glad to hear.
Get your sugary, boozy drinks in, get your salty snacks in, and sit there in your underwear watching top quality snooker for 3 days. I know what you're doing for the next week, Shane.
That sounds delightful.
You are one of those people. Was it what politician was accusing people of sitting on the couch watching Netflix? You're literally sitting on the couch watching snooker for the next 3 days. We know what you're doing. Your fitness regime is in the can.
I'm glad the BBC don't remind you, are you still watching this like Netflix do? Because yes, I am still watching the snooker. Absolutely.
I've actually never seen that on Netflix. I mean, there's a generation gap there. I understand that. Go on. What have you got for us?
Yeah, we'll start with Wolves in the Europa League last night. Unfortunately for the Wolves fans, their dream of winning their first European trophy ended with the 1-0 defeat to Sevilla. That's in the quarterfinals of the Europa League last night. Nuno Espirito Santos' side, whose disrupted season lasted 383 days, saw Raúl Jiménez have his spot kick saved by Sevilla keeper Yassine Bounou. Sevilla struck late through a Lucas Ocampos header for that 1-0 win that sets up a semi-final against Manchester United that will take place on Sunday in Cologne. The Wolves head coach says despite the loss, he's still proud of what they've achieved over the last 12 months.
We had it today really close. Of course, everybody's disappointed, but we should not ignore all the effort that the players have been doing. It's 14 months almost of hard work. Disappointment is something that cannot take away all the good things that we've been doing.
The other semi-final then will see Shakhtar Donetsk play Inter Milan. Shakhtar 4-1 winners against Basel last night. The Champions League quarterfinals begin tonight in Lisbon. Atalanta take on Paris Saint-Germain. Kick-off in that game is at 8 o'clock. Celtic boss Neil Lennon says the Scottish Premiership champions have been bitterly let down by the selfish actions of one individual. Defender Boylan goalie broke coronavirus rules by flying to Spain before playing against Kilmarnock on Sunday. Lennon says it was a baffling decision by the player.
We made it in no uncertain terms that no one could travel, certainly not leave the country anyway, and he has blatantly disregarded my instructions, my medical team's instructions, the club's instructions, and put everything in jeopardy.
Hibs 3 points clear at the top of the Scottish Premiership this morning. The early leaders making it 3 wins from their opening 3 matches with a 1-0 win at newly promoted Dundee United last night. Due to be 5 top-flight fixtures this evening, but of course because of that coronavirus breach, Celtic's trip to St Mirren and Aberdeen, who've had breaches of their own against Hamilton, postponed due to players breaching those guidelines. There was high drama in the first round of the FAI Cup at Turner's Cross last night. Cork City and Longford Town looked set for penalties until a Ricardo Dinanga goal in added time of extra time handed a 1-0 victory to the hosts. Things were more straightforward at Oriel Park, where an early Sean Hoare goal gave Dundalk a 1-0 win over Waterford. The draw for the last 16 will take place at midday today. We've mentioned the snooker, but the World Championship semi-finals get underway this afternoon. The first session in the afternoon sees Karen Wilson take on Anthony McGill. McGill booked his place in the last 4 with a 13-10 win over Kurt Mafflin. 5-time champion Ronnie O'Sullivan came back from 7-2 and then 8-4 down to beat Mark Williams by 13 frames to 10. O'Sullivan will face 3-time champion Mark Selby in the evening session later on. The Rocket played down his chances, Selby afterwards, and also said he had no cue action when speaking to the BBC last night.
I mean, it's just embarrassing, to be honest with you. I mean, if the white was more than 3 foot away from the next ball, I was like, it ain't going in, mate. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. Listen, it's like trying to go and win the US Open with like a 3-iron in your bag. Do you know what I mean? It just makes life just so much more difficult. But listen, I found a way. I managed to kind of, create amongst the balls and be able to make a few. But, I mean, it was either really good or just really bad. Do you know what I mean? And to win this tournament, you don't need to be good. You just need to be steady. I mean, I said before I come to this tournament, I said if I played anyone like Ali Carter and above and they played well, they would take me, you know what I mean? Because I've just got no consistency and I haven't had that for like 6-7 years, hence why I haven't really done well here. That'll be the last thing to go is my scoring, do you know what I mean? That'll always, that's my game, positional plan, and thank God that I have got that, because if I didn't have that, then I would be off the tour, do you know what I mean? Because that's the only thing that holds me together.
Yeah, so Ronnie O'Sullivan against Mark Selby, that's later on this evening. We should move to boxing as well. Eric Donovan's coach Ken Egan says the pair have built up a solid relationship ahead of the biggest bout of Donovan's career. Egan has travelled to the UK with the Kildare man ahead of the fight for the IBF Intercontinental belt. That's against Zelfa Barrett on Friday. Former Olympic silver medalist Egan told OTB Sports last night that he is enjoying coaching the 35-year-old.
Well, I'm only new to this game, okay? I've been on the other side of the road for so many years, boxing and representing the country. But for me, I don't class myself as an expert or, a legend of a coach or a Gusto Mato or that like that. I'm new to this. I'm learning all the time. But we have a great relationship with Eric, and he trusts me and I trust him. Both of us being southpaws, I see things that he probably needs to polish up on that I would suggest that he works on. And he listens, small little things. He's a very, very good southpaw as it is. But just adding those little bits and pieces to his arsenal and just being around him. The two of us bounce off each other, we keep each other relaxed. And I think with the same type of personalities, which was a great thing, So there's no real authority figure coming into the gym. I don't be screaming and shouting at him. And that's the beauty of it is he's driven. He's well driven himself. He doesn't need the big stick on his back. He gets out there and he pushes himself to the limit all the time. I'm not just there to hold the spit bucket. I have plenty of experience as a southpaw in the ring against orthodox boxers. I know what works and what doesn't work. And if I can give him some of my expertise and he adapts to that and brings that to the ring.
Yeah, Ken Egan there on OTB Sports last night. You can get that full interview on the new OTB Sports app, which you can download for free in the App Store or the Play Store. Tottenham have signed Pierre-Emile Højbjerg on a 5-year deal from Southampton. The midfielder joins the North London side for an undisclosed fee, having said he wanted to work under Jose Mourinho. Spurs right-back Kyle Walker-Peters has gone the other way permanently, having spent the second half of last season on loan at Southampton. Some sad news this morning. Former European Ryder Cup golfer Gordon J. Brand has died at the age of 65 following a short illness. He was a member of the 1983 team that lost to the USA by just a point at PGA National Golf Club in Florida. Among the Englishman's other career highlights was finishing runner-up to Greg Norman at the 1986 Open. And finally from me this morning, lads, an 8-race card at Gowran Park this afternoon, with the first off there at 1 o'clock.
Thanks, Shane. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good mornings. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. It is bang on 20 minutes past 8 this morning. We're bringing you our exclusive interview with Fulham defender and Irish international Cyrus Christie. We're talking Fulham's promotion to the Premier League, Stephen Kenny's Ireland, and also the racism that Cyrus has suffered from Irish fans whilst representing this country. Have a look.
OTB AM.
Now, from somewhere hot and sunny, I'm delighted to say we're joined by Ireland and Fulham defender Cyrus Christie. Cyrus, I can tell from that blue sky that life is pretty good wherever you are in the world right now.
It's nice here. It's nice and peaceful, relaxing. So it's a good way to recover for the new season.
And recover from the last season, because it was one of the wildest seasons that anybody is ever going to have. For it to end for you guys in extra time in the playoff final, and for it to end victoriously, is exactly how you want a roller coaster to finish, right?
Yeah, no, I mean 100%. I think we kind of always knew that it was going to be the playoffs. I think at one point it was, it looked like Leeds and West Brom probably got too far ahead of us, and then we managed to pull it back, and the impossible nearly became possible, and then we'd already had our mindset on the playoffs, so we knew, but we still had that hope that we could take the automatics. And once we were into the playoffs, we were super confident that we could perform, and we've got big players in our team that have that experience of going through the playoffs from before, so we knew that we could do well, and we went in there with full of confidence, and I think we showed it in our performances. I understand that maybe Cardiff second leg, I think we had everyone a bit worried, but I thought we was always in control of that game. I mean, they bombarded us with set pieces and throwing, but other than that, they weren't troubling us from open play, and they're a dangerous team, Cardiff, and we managed to get the job done in the first leg, really.
In the final itself, when the match is ticking into the end of normal time and getting into extra time, what's that level of tension actually like? Because it is the most talked about one-off game, and it goes around the world about the value of the match to both teams. How aware are you of that, and just how tense is the occasion?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it is a super tense occasion. I mean, probably makes it a bit different, obviously, with there being no fans, but as the game goes on and every kind of half chance, I think people are obviously a lot nervous, especially when you're sitting in the stands. It's a completely different game to obviously when you're on the pitch, but the clock's ticking by, and you're looking at it thinking, when's this going to end? And like I said, I believe we were the strongest team for out in that game, and we played the best game, and I wouldn't say they had many clear-cut chances, really. We as a team, we performed really well. Our tactics were spot on, and like I said, we went into the game super confident. We were quiet, we were humble, and I believe Brentford done a lot of talking within the press leading up to the game, and I think that kind of gave us the extra edge as well, where we used that as added motivation. Not like we actually needed any, but like I said, we were confident, and we knew that we were prepared properly, and we'd done the job right, and we knew that the occasion was there for us. And like I said, we've got big players that love big occasions, and we rose to that. And Joe Bryan was the main man and the hero for that game, which was fantastic for him, because he's a wonderful player, and he's a fantastic guy, and he's probably come under a bit of criticism, a bit of stick for probably no reason really at all. But for him to get that occasion and take that moment, it was fantastic to see.
Yeah, he did incredible. Like again, kind of Roy the Rover stuff from his perspective. It's mad that you're talking though about how something as small as the opposition talking about you guys. I didn't even see that they'd said any stuff. Was this like? We all got to watch The Last Dance and Michael Jordan talking about how the greatest athlete of all time in many ways still needed the impetus of somebody giving out about him, even if it was true or not true. And here, like with the biggest game in world football, in terms of the money on the line, that little bit of extra motivation helps you guys. It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for us building up, a lot of us were watching The Last Dance and we were playing clips, and you know, we obviously our manager, that is something that he could relate to as in terms of the psychological aspect and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, for us it was added motivation. You know, we picked up on it straight away, and a lot of people were telling us about it. And you know, they obviously said that we would fear them because they've won the 2 previous games. And you know, a lot of us within the Fulham setup, you know, I've been in games where, for example, we played Hull in the playoffs. You know, I think we'd scored maybe 6-7 goals past them, and they hadn't conceded against us in the season. And then we go into the first leg of the playoff, they beat us 3-0. So anything can happen when it comes to the playoffs, and you know, in a one-off game. And you know, like we said, they done a lot of talking, and it was that added motivation for us. But at the end of the day, we knew the biggest prize that was on the line, and you know, we knew that we could go down in the history books, say, at Fulham, you know, with another promotion. And you know, there was that added incentive for a lot of the lads. But you know, the main goal was to get back to the Premier League, and we knew that it was going to be such a tough season because you know, we're coming down as potentially the big dogs, with obviously having spent so much money in the Premier League last time, and we were the big fish that people really wanted to beat. And you know, it's always a lot tougher, and I think people don't actually understand how tough it is sometimes in them situations, because teams really do come and they up their game. You know, you see them one week and you know, they haven't been great against a team maybe that was in and around them in the same position, but they come to us and you know, they turn it on. And that's the same for us when you go and play the likes of the Man Cities and the big teams in one-off games in the cup games. It's the same. So yeah, you know, for us to get over the line and win it I think in fantastic style. You know, they always do say Wembley probably is the best one to do it for, is the playoff final. But you know, it's great when you get there, but I'm sure it's not great for the heart.
No, absolutely. Come here, are you going to be a better player this time than you were the last time in the Premier League? How different will you be, do you think, from having the experience and just being that little bit older?
Yeah, I mean, you know, experience is key, I think, as well. And I always talk about it's them moments where, you know, as a footballer, not everything goes your way. You know, we went up into the Premier League with hoping that we were going to achieve something and not get relegated, you know, with the team that we had and assembled, and it just didn't quite work out. You know, a lot of the team changed around. No one really had the consistency to play each game all the time, and it kept changing around. But for me, I think it is a massive factor if you can play week in, week out and get that confidence. And you know, I think in that year, a lot of players, including myself, we didn't get the run of games. And you know, I came from Middlesbrough, coming into a Fulham team that had obviously, they were winning every week. So you know, it wasn't really like I had loads of games, and then they'll go up to the Premier League, and you're hoping that you play a game, and then I feel like I had a good game, and then I was out the next game for 3 games. And you know, as a footballer, momentum is key. And you know, like I said, this time I think everyone's going back with maybe a point to prove. And you know, I said it this year, obviously when we got relegated as well. And from a personal point of view, obviously you want to come back in and you want to prove yourself, and you want to rectify the season before. And you know, it's took me a while to even get a run of games, and even now it's 2 or 3 games, and you're out for 1 or 2, and because of the tactical changes. And you know, it's so tough. And if you look at the other teams where they get a lot of players are playing regularly, and that's obviously got to be the aim. And you know, with the lads going in there now, we have Premier League experience, and I'm sure they're going to bring in a couple more that with Premier League experience. And I'm sure this time round it's going to be a lot different. If you look at our team and the way that we were able to grind results out, and we showed a different kind of resiliency compared to last time.
Are you checking your phone to see the updates and like really hoping some big names come, but just not at right back or full back?
Listen, that's football. I'm sure they'll probably want to bring in another right back. You know, you see certain things, and I'm sure that's what the fans probably want as well. And you know, I mean, you know, I'm sure they're gonna look at every position to bring in more, because it's gonna be such a long season. We're gonna need a big squad. And like I said, for me, it's just, you know, I'd like to be obviously given a chance, because you know, I feel since I've been at Fulham, I haven't been given the fairest chance to prove myself week in, week out. I've not really had a massive run of games on the bounce. I know I played maybe 30 games this season or whatever, but that was in stages. It wasn't regular games, and obviously that's tough to take when I've come from teams where I've played week in, week out, and you know I haven't been able to prove myself to the full capability of while I've been at Fulham. But I've showed it this season what I'm capable of when I was given the run of games, and you know I check everything, and you know I know that I had a great win ratio when I played, and the points per game and more goals that we scored. So you know all that goes in my favour. But at the end of the day, it's what the manager chooses and what he picks, and you know I need to go out there and prove myself every training session, and that's what it's about as a footballer. So yeah, I mean we'll be looking forward to next season, and you know, like I said, I've not really been looking at the news to see who we've been signed and who we've been linked with. I think we need a bit of a break from football because it's been so intense, and it's not long till we're back. So, you know, I've just got to make the most with my family and friends and see what the future holds.
No, fair enough. Absolutely, and completely well deserved after such a weird situation in the season as well. That must have taken a toll mentally too. I did want to ask about Stephen Kenny name checked yourself and John Egan at one stage when he was asked about defenders who were playing well, and you know obviously it's a new Ireland and a new era as well. So that's something else that if things go well over the next couple of months, it's going to be an incredibly exciting period of time where there is a new manager who comes in and who really wants to play football and really likes his defenders to take responsibility in terms of passing the ball and being creative forces. What's that like when, you know, I mean, obviously you're a grown man, you don't need someone to tell you that you're playing well, but it must help when a new manager comes in and you're one of the first names that he checks.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was obviously, it was great to hear and great to read, considering I don't think Mick McCarthy ever said a word to me, obviously, when he come in. And, you know, I went from playing quite a lot of games under Martin O'Neill. I think I played in pretty much most of them towards the back end, and then come in and, you know, Mick didn't really say anything to me. I came for one game. I can't remember who it was against, and you know, and then never played another game. So, you know, I think even anyone in your stage, it's always good to just hear a different perspective from anyone, from a certain manager maybe, or a coach, or whatever it might be, regardless of your age or not. There's always someone that has a different point of perspective and an opinion on what you could be doing right and what you could be doing wrong. So, yeah, obviously, I think most of the lads have probably spoke to Stephen Kenny now, and I spoke to him, and you know, obviously he spoke about his plans and different things like that, and you know, he seems like a great guy, and yeah, like he highlighted, I've been playing well, and like I said, I felt like I came back from before lockdown. It was obviously quite annoying. I felt I was playing actually really well, and then obviously the pandemic hit and got put into lockdown, and you know, I came with a mindset that, you know, I wanted to get back into the Ireland setup, and I want to always play for my country. And you know, there's never a time where I've never not wanted to. And you know, like I said, when Mick called me up that time, I wasn't even in the provisional squad, and he rang me on the Friday evening and asked if I could fly out on the Sunday. And you know, no hesitation, I come out, and that's a standpoint. We've got so many fantastic players now, and it's great. And I wanted to just, you know, I want to keep performing well, and hopefully I can prove that in the Premier League this season and be given a chance. And it's exciting times for the Irish national team, I believe, because I think someone mentioned it, there's 20-something players that will be in the Premier League next season. So we're going to have a good squad, and there's some good young players coming through. So it's fantastic times ahead.
And fingers crossed the games come thick and fast and we end up qualifying for European Championships, which is going to be held a couple of games in Dublin. It could be sensational.
Yeah, that'll be obviously fantastic if, you know, we can make it. And I'm sure we've been there before, so, you know, we'd love to get there again. And if you're playing in such a big competition in front of your home fans, it will definitely give us the added boost. I mean, even in France, it felt like we were playing at home. There were so many fans there. It was just such a joyous occasion, and you know, I'm sure the lads want to relive that.
Cyrus, I did want to talk to you about the issue of racism in football as well, because you know, there was a horrific incident where you were racially abused by people who claimed to be Ireland fans after one of the games, I think the Denmark game. And recently we've seen this issue come to the fore again. As somebody who has experienced this over a long period of time, Are you in any way hopeful that what's happening at the moment has enough honesty about the conversation that we might make some progress on the fundamental issues of systemic racism which exist in our society?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've already touched on it. I think there's a lot of systematic racism throughout every industry, and I always believe it's hard to speak upon because people don't really understand unless they're in that position. And you touch back on Ireland games, for example. If you look at that, and I always said it to Darren, I always said to Thingy, it wasn't just a Denmark game. In the previous 2 months, obviously it was October and September when we had the other international games. It kept happening after every game. I was getting racial abuse. I wasn't obviously saying and picking up on it. Well, I picked up on it, sorry, but I wasn't telling people about it. It's just it's what it is. Carrying on, obviously, the Denmark one, it wasn't me that brought it up. It was James McLean, and then, I think that happens a lot. And I always said it to Darren and different stuff. It's funny that, Cyrus, you're not Irish, but you're born in England or whatever it might be, but I don't see the likes of Richard Keogh, or I didn't see the likes of Harry Ott. I didn't see the other lads, that Kieran Clark or whoever it might have been, that were born in England. No one was saying that same stuff to them. But me, David McGoldrick, Callum Robinson, the three black lads, it's coming at us that same way. We're the ones that are getting spoke about like that. And, that's just one little minor issue, but people won't realise that, and because they're not in our position. So, yeah, I mean, it was numerous occasions that it happened, and then obviously, I had to be the unfortunate one that scored the own goal. I didn't mean to, it hit my trailer leg when I went to go block it, and that it was what it is. And then I've took the blame for that. And to be honest, I didn't even know I scored no goal at that point. I actually thought it already gone in, but until obviously I seen after, and it's one of them. Like I said, I'm used to it and used to it happening. It happened in the previous 4 games leading up to that. It happened when I first joined up as well. It started. It even happened one time at the training ground from fans that were standing outside there. Obviously, they were kids. Do you know what I mean? So it's one of them. It happens. There's a lot of systematic racism, and until people of all different cultures realise that, especially white people, because it doesn't really happen to them, and until they pick up and it realises. And like I said, I think their voice is always bigger than everyone else's. And if James McLean hadn't said it, I don't think people would have took as much notice. And it's always you're blaming it on a bad performance, or it's because you scored an own goal. It was never because of that. Like I said, it wasn't me that brought it up. I took it on the chin and moved on. And James McLean brought it up, and his voice in Ireland and is probably a lot bigger than mine. And he understands the situation because he gets quite a lot of racial abuse as well, which no one ever speaks about and picks up on. And yeah, people might say, oh, maybe he brings it on himself. But I'm not sure he does. He's standing up for what he believes in, his experiences, and that's always the case. Is when you bring up your experiences and what's happened, people never want to believe you, and then it causes all sorts of, like James, for example, no one knows the history behind it. I'm sure if you sat down and spoke to him on the history as to why he's maybe not done certain things, people will then realise that certain situations have affected the way his beliefs. So yeah, it's crazy. It's one of them. I'm sure at the minute a lot of people are speaking on it. It's probably gone a bit quiet now because obviously it's not such as a hot topic at the minute, and it's just a matter of time before people need to keep the momentum going and keep speaking up on it and make a change.
Can I just go back to something that you said there? There was an incident at the training ground. Was this at an Ireland training ground? So it would have been in Dublin, probably.
Yeah, this was in Dublin. This was one of my first couple of times when I was obviously new. Yeah, it was just we obviously people outside. Obviously after training, we signed the staff. There's people there, and obviously someone they come up to me and was they just basically obviously it was something racist or whatever they said, and it was a bit shocking. And then obviously the other lads refused to sign some of the stuff because there was a few of the others were there and had seen it, and it was just. I was in shock, but it was just because I didn't expect it at that time. I was thinking, oh, we're at the training ground, whatever. Yeah, and it was just one of them. It's one of them situations. It's like I said, it's not the first time. I'm sure it's not going to be the last. And yeah, I think it's when people catch you by surprise is when it's the worst. But like I said, I've had it so many times. It's just you become accustomed to it and you're used to it. And but you have to speak up. If you don't speak up, then people don't understand and they won't realise actually what is going on in this world. And, you know, we can't stay silent. And that's for everyone, not just people from black origin. It's people from all types of races and multicultural backgrounds and white people as well. So everyone needs to do their part and speak up, and I'm sure we can make a change. And I think the generation of kids coming out understand that, and, you know, and they've already showed it really. So it's just a matter of like I said, keeping that momentum going to make a change.
The momentum is really important. We saw Danny Rose talk about racial profiling recently, and we saw Don Butler talk about being racially profiled, and both of them kind of like having that experience and having to go through that experience and having to talk about that experience is, I imagine, quite wearing. Like, there you are, hopefully having a brilliant experience with your peers in international football. And sorry, did you say it was a kid, or was it a teenager, or?
I was a kid, yeah. That's why it shocked me. It's come from a kid, so as much you don't want to blame the kid. So it's obviously coming from the parents, in my mind anyway. I mean, you may think different, but from a kid saying that. And then what shocked me the most is that obviously he's there with the teacher. The teacher didn't say nothing. She allowed it. And it was just like, unless you educate these people, then it's just going to keep happening. And, you know, it's one of them. That's what I find scary. You know, I always think to myself, like, you know, you have older generations and, you know, they're so stubborn that they're not going to change their mind because, you know, if you've been on this earth for 50, 60 years, you know, it's hard to change someone's opinion. But, you know, you've got the kids that understand that what is going on in this world, and, you know, they're able and open to see what's happened. They're growing up in a different time now, and that shouldn't be the case. You know, they're open to so much education with Google and books and libraries, whatever it might be. So, you know, and then for a teacher who's in a high position, who's meant to be a carer, they're meant to be obviously maybe say non-biased. I don't know if that's the right kind of phrase to maybe say. So, you know, for her to not say anything which was what shocked me even more. So, you know, it's just, I don't know what's being said around him at home or the education that he's had. And, you know, it was one of them. It's a kid, right? I'm sure he's got enough longevity in his life to understand where he went wrong there, and obviously, you know, hopefully 20 years from now, he still doesn't have the same opinion.
I know, and like, how much confidence can any of us have that child is going to be led on the right pathway to have some kind of understanding or awakening that what he's doing is fundamentally wrong, and it's horrible, and it's really horrible that you've gone through an experience like that. But it does seem, from what you're saying, that you've kind of you've experienced this so much with your coming over to Ireland and playing for Ireland, that like it should just be this great thing where you're playing international football and getting to, you know, lean back on a team and a support network and a group of peers and the supporters who are 100% behind you, because like that's generally what international football is like. And I would say that the majority of Irish football fans are like that. But if we don't actually step in and correct that kid or explain to that teacher why that's not acceptable, then we're not doing our bit as football fans, as broadcasters, as journalists, as Irish citizens. I mean, like I specifically remember after the Denmark game, there was an incident. Do you feel like we deal with these incidents properly when they are highlighted? Because you know, it doesn't feel like we've kind of always responded properly when these incidents are highlighted and spoken about.
No, I don't. At that time, I don't think the incident was dealt with accordingly. The same way the previous 4 trips, when it happened after every game, it didn't get dealt with accordingly. It was put out there for people to see, but people just turned a blind eye to it. And so it's in that case, I mean, you demo one. It was there for everyone to see. I mean, there was obviously a massive reaction, but, you know, like I said, the reaction wouldn't have been the same if I come out and said it. It was James McLean that actually come out and said it. By the time he had actually said it, I'd already forgot about it. So, you know, but the thing is, I had seen it on that present day, and my friends had seen it as well. So it was already picked up on, and then there was people liking it and retweeting it and all the different comments. They could see it, but no one wants to pull the issue up on the guy. And the weirdest thing was his profile was there for everyone to see. And then obviously when the Garda come in and supposedly said they were going to deal with it, absolutely done nothing, you know. So that's where you give up. And I've spoken to it so many times with so many people. I can understand why people don't say anything, because it never gets dealt with from any association to whoever it may be, the police, whatever it might be. They don't do enough. They don't even they come to a certain point where, because it's more high profile, they look like they want to do something, but it's more to, I think, to benefit themselves, so they don't look bad. But then behind the scenes, they're really and truly, how much are they actually doing? That is the question. And I mean, there's so many incidents that happen, and the toughest thing is proving it. Even if it did happen, as well, how do they prove it? And I understand that is tough because it's so-and-so's word, but if that's face to face, but then when you're seeing it on Twitter and different social media platforms, it's there for everyone to see. And Twitter have the whole freedom of speech law where it comes under. And I mean, I understand everyone's got a freedom of speech, but to what extent is your freedom of speech to just spit racial hate at people? And I understand that everyone has their opinion, but that's when you're, you know, making petitions for people to get lynched. I mean, you know, that's a threat on your life. And, you know, like I said, the Garda really didn't understand where I was coming from. They didn't do anything about it. And, you know, I don't know. I don't know what they expected. And even when I sat down and spoke to them, they didn't understand when I was explaining different stories about growing up. And they said, "Oh yeah, well, I just don't believe someone in Ireland could be racist." And I mean, you're going to get racial people everywhere. I mean, I'm not trying to say the whole country was racist, but you have everything there that you need, the evidence, what people were saying. I believed it was enough for them to do something, but, you know, I come away from, actually, we ended up ending the meeting early because I just knew that they wouldn't do anything. And then when someone from my family actually rang to find out what was going on, they said, "We actually don't have a case. We don't even have a department to deal with this." So, you know, you're fighting a losing battle there, really. And now I can see why people don't ever try and pursue anything. And I think that's why you don't see many cases where people get held accountable for their actions.
Did a guard say to you in a meeting, I don't believe people in Ireland can be racist?
Yeah, even they didn't understand them. You know, yeah, that's what they said to me. But then I thought, you know what, let me just give them a story of what happened when I was younger. Yeah, I mean, I can understand it, but, you know, I just can't ever see someone in Ireland being racist. And I was like, yeah. And then I'd done another one, and it was like 3 different stories, and they just still gave me the same answer. But the craziest thing was the police officer pulled the guy up on his phone. He found it straight away. So for me, I just don't understand how you can put it up in front of us, but then 2, 3, 4, 5 months down the line, and then a year later, you get a message saying, "Oh, case is closed," but they haven't actually even tried to do anything when they have the evidence there. So, yeah, I don't understand, and that's the main reason I think people don't pursue different stuff. And for me personally, anyway, there's been so many occasions where I could have pursued it, and they bother, but it gets to the point where you have to maybe just keep speaking up because, like I said, it's going to be a reoccurring cycle.
Well, that's the thing. And look, I think everybody in Ireland now understands exactly just how difficult it is for people of colour to live in this country and how difficult it has been recently. And in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, there was a long national conversation that was had about this, where the stories of racism that people had suffered began to surface and began to be told. But that takes a toll as well. Like, we're asking people of colour to educate people in Ireland by revealing very hurtful details about stuff that must be incredibly frustrating. So it's almost like we're asking you to take responsibility for educating the people who are racially abusing it. That doesn't seem fair either.
Yeah, no, it's not fair at all. And I mean, it's a tough one because obviously I wouldn't say I'm fully educated on it. But I can only go off my experiences because when you're growing up, you don't actually learn about the different systematic oppression growing up as you know, you learn about the certain things in history class or whatever, but none of it is anything to do with Black history. You don't learn about all the different kind of stuff that has happened. And that's why I think the education bit is so key for people. And, you know, I think that has to be looked into and changed as the kids growing up. You know, they need to learn about that kind of stuff. And even for myself, I have to go and do my own education to learn about that kind of stuff. And I'm seeing stuff every day, people reposting things like, oh, wow, that's interesting. You know, I would have never knew that if someone else didn't post it, you know. So, yeah, I think, like we said, I think education definitely is key. And until we can change people's mind and open their mind up as to what is going on. And, you know, it shouldn't take something like George Floyd to happen, but that is what it takes for people to actually wake up and listen, because if it doesn't harm them personally and they don't feel a sense of emotion towards it, then, you know, that's why people turn a blind eye and they don't speak, because it doesn't affect them personally. So that's always the toughest thing is, so, you know, it's easy coasting and otherwise, but yeah, I think education is key. And, you know, it's where do we go from here now? And, you know, it's like I said, like I touched on earlier, you know, I don't want to repeat myself, but it's keeping that momentum going and still educating people to realise what's gone on previously and how it's still kind of going on now, but just in a different manner.
No, I think that's 100% correct. And there's just two quick things that I wanted to mention. Because when the Mail, I think, had the original story about the lack of Garda response, we'd emailed the Gardaí and they told us that the first suspect was a juvenile at the time of the offence, and he was deemed suitable for inclusion in the Garda Youth Diversion Scheme, which has apparently taken place. And then they also said that a full investigation file was submitted to the Director of Public Prosecutions in relation to the second culprit, who was in their mid-20s, and a direction of no prosecution was received, which means that the case gets dropped, essentially. Now, we were able to find that out by asking formal questions to their press office, but it doesn't sound like the liaison with you, who were the victim of these, and I use the word victim advisedly, were actually given the same access to the information, and the follow-through isn't there. So there's clearly a breakdown in that process. The last thing, the power of the players kneeling before matches, the first time it happened was this, like, okay, there's a real chance now something might happen. We need to make sure that the momentum isn't just a badge and a pre-match ritual, because that could very quickly just become like pre-match handshakes. It's like, does anybody actually pay any attention to pre-match handshakes anymore? This was like a big thing to make, and then
yeah.
So something proper has to happen, and something meaningful has to happen, and maybe it's the captains of the teams in the Premier League who actually can be leaders on this. And again, we're asking footballers to be leaders in society in a way that maybe they haven't been prepared for all their life. And actually, it should be the politicians, but ultimately they're not going to do anything. So it's a very difficult quandary you guys find yourselves in.
Oh, 100%. I think in a time like this, I think people have actually realised how much footballers actually do in terms of outside of football and in terms of this kind of stuff. Whether, you know, you look at Rashford for what he done for kids that needed their school meals, and, you know, I think he made the what's his name, Boris Johnson, do a U-turn on it, you know. So, you know, the power of the voices is there for footballers, because ultimately I think a lot of people do look up to us as role models, and we have to take that responsibility. But, you know, I'm going to say there's a lot of footballers out there that do a lot of stuff that people don't know about, and, you know, and the politicians, I believe, have to do more. They have to, but you look at the politicians, and a lot of them are upper class, middle class, whatever they might have been. So they have no relation to someone that's coming from a poor background. They don't understand the struggle and the things that they've had to go through, because, you know, ultimately they've come up on a nicer lifestyle, and they don't understand the struggle and what people have been through. And I believe that's a lot in most cases, in most industries, you know, at the higher end of the spectrum. You know, there's no one there that you can look up to and think, you know what, they've come from where I've come from. They've made it. They understand what I'm going through. And I think if there's people around that people know and understand what these young kids may be going through, or not even just young kids, that people that are maybe in their 40s, 50s that are struggling and, you know, struggling to put meals on their table, they don't have the money, and they understand that someone in a certain industry has come from the same background that they've come through. There's just that tiny bit of a relationship there, and that's what I believe, you know. And I think because I play football, if you look at footballers and when you're coming through, you look up to certain players and the role models, but then when you get to a certain level of the game, you're realising that PFA and the FA and stuff like that, like who there can I relate to? They haven't come through the same struggle that we went through as young kids, and there's no one there that, I mean, I don't, to be honest, I couldn't tell you who's in the PFA or the FA, but like I said, the issues at hand doesn't really affect them because they were brought up on middle class, upper class privilege in that sense. So that's, I think, is the toughest part, and I think they need to stop putting people in them positions or even just around them, surrounding themselves with people that understand the need for the people that have got the problems, really, and that they can relate to them will definitely help a lot.
That's a very practical, easy thing to do straight away, is to diversify all of those boards and diversify all of those staffs. So actually every lived experience, particularly in the PFA, so every lived experience is represented and people understand exactly what the trials and difficulties of young footballers are. Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's not much diversity in some of these industries, and you know, that's what everyone is talking about right now. But you know, it wouldn't go. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of ex-players out there, or they don't even have to be an ex-player. That's someone that reasonably understands what is going on and what is needed in this world, so that they could go out there and find. But you know, I'm not sure. Well, you'd like to think that would change at some point, but you know, it's not going to change overnight. I mean, how much is going to change within the next year? I'm sure there's going to be a tiny bit of change, but it's just, like we said, it's just going to have to take it month by month, year by year, and you know, it's at some point maybe I believe not much is going to change too much between now and maybe my end of my career. But you know, you'd like to think there'd been some sort of change, and you know, it's just us as people. How can we affect the world that we live in and make it a better place? Well, we can all do our bit. I hope you're wrong about the speed of change. I hope that the moment that's happening globally, where people are genuinely trying to look at themselves and check their privilege and go, well, actually, what could I do? I hope that we take this opportunity, because the pandemic is a big opportunity for us to hit a reset button and try and bring some fairness to life. And I hope it's not too traumatic talking about it. Like I really, you know, it's difficult to ask you to talk about it, and it's not fair to ask you to talk about it. But I think everybody who hears the story of a child abusing you at Ireland training is going to be shocked, and also not shocked that it happened. That's the worst part, is that like we can visualize it, we can see it, we can hear it in our heads, we know that this stuff is going on. But I think by bringing it out into the light, we at least begin to make everybody go, hang on a second, this is nonsense. This should not be happening. So I'll let you get back to the nice blue skies, and hopefully your holiday, the rest of your holiday is great. Cyrus, we're all behind you. Like, the Ireland football fans are 100% behind you, really.
No worries. Thank you. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
OTB AM.
Pretty shocking stuff. Really pretty shocking stuff. And very hard to process, I think, as well. So we obviously did that interview yesterday, and I've been thinking about it very much non-stop since. And like, these were Ireland fans. We can't say they're so-called Ireland fans. They're Ireland fans. They're living and walking and breathing amongst you, and you're talking to them on a daily basis. You know racists in your circle of friends, and in your work, and in your school. You know them. And if we don't have a conversation about it, then we're never going to change things. And this is our chance right now to change things. Or we can pretend it doesn't happen. We can have a week of outrage. We can have a week of stories. We can have a week of listening to radio shows and go, sure, look, it's over now. But it's not over. Cyrus Christie comes to Ireland training and a kid abuses him, and there's a teacher standing there looking at it. And actually, you know what? How many people would intervene in that scenario? How many people would intervene in that scenario? So you've got to ask yourself, what would you do? And now the time has come to say, I'm going to intervene. I'm going to say something. And there will be a lot of people behind you. Because we've surely, we've had enough of this nonsense. I'm going to bring you through the newspapers here, and we might talk about that in 1 second as well. slightly underprepared for these, I'm not going to lie. It's 9 o'clock this morning here. Smith, water breaks have made GAA referees' lives easier. And Madigan joins queue behind Sexton for green light. Lots of Ian Madigan stuff in the papers today. And Clare clubs back Cratloe despite 6 positive tests for COVID-19. So COVID stories are actually dominant because of what's going on in Scotland at the moment. The Telegraph, a quartet of boards fail gender target. I have no doubt that they're going to fail diversity targets as well. And then there's more cricket stories there as well. The missed penalty from last night, which cost Sevilla. It's so selfish. Lennon slams Bolingoli over COVID breach. Dundalk work for cup win, and Henderson in race to recover for Six Nations. So Ian Henderson is the latest doubt for that. Yellow wall. Jayden must force hand to get Dream United move. So as Daniel Harris was reporting on Twitter yesterday, he's going to have to actually appeal for a move, and that would cost him a lot of money. You've put us all at risk. This is the Neil Lennon anger story. They think it's roll over. It is now. Penalty miss knocks Wolves out. Wolves are rattled and glum. Boot in the balls. Lenny lashes Bolingoli for putting entire season at risk, and they're talking about transferring him now after this. Doyle is irate at leaders. Andrew Doyle of Shelburne has blamed appalling governance of the FAI for quitting 2 of their committees. That story's not going to go away anytime soon. And broken English. Wolves miss out on glamour semi with United as they pay penalty for Raoul Howler. You stupid boy was the headline on the Celtic story as well. Lennon Fury over Celtic stars baffling Spanish trip. Laois consider not playing county league games to make time for clubs. This is an interesting story from Colin Keyes. Laois are to seek clarification on the consequences of not fulfilling their remaining Allianz Football League fixtures in October to allow them to complete their local club championship programmes. One of the 3 counties to have stricter measures imposed over the weekend because of surging COVID-19 cases. GAA matches have been suspended for 2 weeks, a period of time that incorporates 3 weekends. So with the last 3 weekends, they're now looking at, well, do we actually have to play those county league games? Not a great scenario for their county managers in that situation. Murray takes legal action against FAI. Former Ireland physio Kieran Murray has issued legal proceedings against the FAI. It's an employment tribunals case. And Celtic's COVID chaos. Lennon livid and appalled after Spain trip by Bolingoli triggered SPL cancellation. So you can tell that there's a few main stories in the papers this morning. 500 million Games Village ditched. This is the 2022 Commonwealth Games in Birmingham have had to abort plans to construct a 500 million athletes village and will instead divide the competitions across 3 separate sites using university and hotel accommodation. So you're starting to see some of the cutbacks bite in England. And Broad senior finds swearing son. So yeah, that's a cricket story. And then politics in the UK racing is the lead on the Racing Post. And then packing a punch, PSG are going to beat Atalanta tonight, according to the Racing Post. What do you got for us on?
Well, we talk about this Laois story, this Clare story, this Scotland story. I mean, they're all... None of them are really linked with one another, but they all kind of trigger the same thing in your mind. Like, kind of when you mentioned the Laois story there, this is kind of a huge deal if this story is the beginning of something where the Laois County Board are looking for their Division 2 campaign to not be completed and the precedent that might set. So just to be clear here, Laois can still get relegated from Division 2 and they can still get promoted from Division 2. When it comes to finishing out the Allianz League, they are in as important a position as any other county in this. They can still get relegated to a potential Tier 2 championship next year, or they can play and dine at the top table potentially next year as well in the Allianz League in Division 1. They're now thinking to themselves, hold on a minute, is this thing worth it? Is it actually worth sacrificing our club season for the sake of being able to play championship football, for the sake of playing inter-county football? Now, of course, the Midlands are in a very different situation here, but we don't know what is going to happen next in this country, where the next localised lockdown is going to take place and how that is going to affect things. We are coming up extremely close to the start of this GAA championship now if other county boards actually want to put club first. We've seen Mike Quirk come out in the past few months and say, I will be giving my expertise to the clubs. As an inter-county management team, we'll be giving our expertise to the clubs, and that's about it. They have prioritised the club game. And I'm sure that they're not the only county board who've been doing this. This is just one of the latest things that you've seen that would suggest to you that we should be really cautious about whether or not we will see any inter-county games this year.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, and that has that continues to be the case right up until those matches start. And when they start, what happens if somebody jets off to Spain for 24 hours, or if 6 of them get COVID from something or other, from sharing a car? Who knows? Like, there's a million different ways that this could go off the rails. I think you got to keep, if you're the GAA, you got to keep planning for the eventuality that it will happen and hope that it will happen. I mean, the questions about NFET and so elite sport can continue to happen. If Leinster Rugby were in Portlaoise, they would be getting ready for a match on one of these weekends in the middle of the lockdown, and I can see why if you're Laois, you're like, well, this doesn't make that much. The internal consistency of what's being inflicted on them doesn't make that much sense. But it is what it is. You've got to play those games at some point if there is relegation and promotion riding on it. So you would have to kick back the championship a couple of weeks and Laois's involvement in that championship. Or if they were to go out, when they go out from that championship, you then have to play those inter-county matches. Those games have to get played, right?
If you kick back the inter-county championship anymore, you're into 2021, which is fine. Like, that's absolutely fine. But the problem is then when you kick it back further, you're eating into the start of next season at some point, and eventually that is when the whole thing gets scrapped. I find the Cratloe thing very interesting as well. And it's not this specific story, it's just kind of in the context of what's happening in Scotland over the last few days. Now, of course, the thing in Scotland has involved 2 very silly cases where you've had, I'm using the word silly here because I think the Aberdeen situation where there's a bunch of players going out drinking is on the lower scale of stupidity. Obviously, the Ballybolingoli story is on the upper scale of stupidity to actually go over and go to Spain for 24 hours. So I'm not suggesting that anybody in our sporting circles will ever do what Bolingoli did. I think that will be a massive outlier. But you look at what the result is here. Bolingoli comes back, he plays a game, didn't self-isolate after going to Spain. That then led to 2 games being postponed essentially in the Scottish Premiership. In Aberdeen's case, it was 4 positive cases, and that is what led to a couple of their games being called off. Now, if we park the stupidity for one moment, the Cratloe situation is actually more serious when you're dealing with the pure figures, when you're dealing with the pure positive tests. The Cratloe situation, and we take away the idea of human behaviour and how stupid a human being has been or otherwise. The end product here is the same. The conversation that is being had in Scotland at the moment is that we are one step away from calling off a professional sports league that exists in a bubble. At what point are we going to have the same conversation in Ireland about sporting competitions that very much do not exist in a bubble whatsoever, that very much involve players who go out into the community every single day? I fear that we're very, very close to having this discussion, and that separate county boards, maybe the responsibility won't be on them. Maybe it'll have to come from Central Council, and it'll have to come from Croke Park very shortly. That this is becoming a routine story at the moment. That we pick up the back pages every morning now, and it's like, oh, there's another club who've had an outbreak of coronavirus. This is getting very, very close to breaking point, I suspect. And as you say, the national guidelines are slowly getting stricter. The national mood is slowly getting darker. And it is only a matter of time before our freedom that we've enjoyed for the last few weeks with sport, I fear, that freedom starts to get taken away in a little while. I'm not sure. I don't know if the country's going to be able to handle. I mean, I know from talking to people on the ground in those counties that it's fairly devastating. And it's devastating in the way that it was delivered as well. It's like, oh, it's back to lockdown, and actually, you know, it's not as bad as the original lockdown, because obviously there's no 2K. I mean, there's 2K if you happen to be up against the border, but you can travel in the rest of the county. It's really, I think that people don't have full confidence that the measures were designed with the outcome in mind, that they were like, let's cobble together these things really quickly, let's get them public. And actually the significant issues, as we all know, were the direct provision centres and the meat factories. And belatedly, we're beginning to deal with those issues and we're beginning to talk about them. In the meantime, a lot of people who did absolutely everything by the book are being punished. So, I actually think that it's possible for us to separate sport and what's happening from everything else and say,
obviously, not that sport can happen in a bubble, but that like sport can continue because it's been doing what it's supposed to be doing. Likewise, at some point, we're going to have to reopen for business. We're going to have to get back to whatever the next phase of life is going to look like. We can't lock down again and have no alternative for what life is going to be like. Like, what does life look like when the kids go back to school and when figures start to go through the roof again? Does everything get locked down? Does everybody go home? Are we all working from home for the next 2 years until, or are we like just hoping that somehow this Russian vaccine, which has skipped the first 2 or 3 phases of analysis, is like a magic bullet that makes the world fixed again? So like, do everything we can to whatever level we can, and then go, okay, well that's we're now calibrated. That's the basic level that we go to. I think that like it's going to be very interesting to see if the local lockdowns actually have any impact, or if they work, or if they were the right course of action. We're in them at the moment, and so we're living that experiment. But I don't know if that's going to be a successful plan into the future.
I think at the very least we need to be quite appreciative that we do have sport and that we do have these GAA matches. Actually, if that's your only game that you watch, that at least they are happening. And this idea of trying to up crowds probably isn't going to be realistic for a little while at least, but just to at least have them, and that we can still play games with a few cancellations here and there, is a really positive thing. And long may it continue, despite the fact that you are looking at what's happening elsewhere and thinking to yourself, we're walking a bit of a tightrope here.
What's next?
We talk about the rugby. Ian Madigan there in a lot of the back pages this morning. I'm not sure, do you have the quotes there in front of you? He was talking about it being a serious boost that Andy Farrell gave him a shout out, and he hasn't played a lot in the last 12 months. So, like, I mean, I haven't really thought about this a lot over the last little while. I'm not sure about you, but the fact that the game is coming back in the next few weeks to this island, that we're going to be having these conversations again about where players lie on the depth chart, how we're fixed in certain positions. And to be honest with you, if you asked me yesterday what would be your list of the prospective Irish out-halves if Test rugby comes back later on this year, I would have totally forgotten about Ian Madigan. No disrespect to him, but rugby is just completely frozen in my mind since March. But Andy Farrell's obviously name dropped him this week. He says that playing for Ireland is his #1 goal. Yet again, there's obviously a bit of a backlog for that position. You've got Ross Byrne and Jack Carty, who played in the last year for Ireland. Joey Carberry still recovering from injury. And then you've got Billy Burns in the mix as well. So there's a number of options here. But I wonder if Ian Madigan's going to be the joker in the pack somewhat, if Joey Carberry's still going to be crocked for a lot of the season. If you're
Madigan, you're backing yourself to get ahead of everybody there, right?
I'm just about to say that. There's a case to be made that Ian Madigan is your backup 10. He is your kicker off the bench, and you're straight back into that substitutes role. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it, and it's almost like a little bit of a shock to the system, kind of coming to terms with the story as well this week, where it's like, hold on a minute, this is a really big thing for Ireland to be able to have this option again, because we really didn't know what we were doing when Joey Carberry got injured and Sexton's form was patchy, or if Sexton was injured as well. There was no heir apparent. And it does seem to me that Ian Madigan would be top of that list.
He's 31, and so it's time now for him to do it. Dan McFarlane was on with Joe a couple of weeks ago, maybe even only 10 days ago, and was saying that Joe asked, like, is he there as a utility back? Is he going to fit in and play here and there? And he was like, no, he's here as a 10. It was very definitive. He is here as a 10, and he's coming back as a 10. And obviously, he's already got 30-odd caps when Joe Schmidt was Ireland coach, and then he left, so was unavailable for selection. I mean, was available for selection, but the RFU decided that he's not. I shouldn't always point that out. It was a serious boost for Andy Farrell to give me a shout out, given I haven't played a whole lot for the last 12 months. For me personally, coming back and being able to play for one of the Irish provinces and playing for Ireland as one of my main goals has really focused me with my training, given me something to aim at. And then he goes on further to say his #1 goal is to play for Ireland again. So he's been away with Bordeaux and Bristol. And look, sometimes out-halves mature a little bit later than everybody else, and he could be entering a 3 or 4 year period where he is our #1 and becomes established as #1. Like until Carberry puts a bunch of games together, and like fingers crossed, because obviously he's such a brilliant talent, and we all want Joey Carberry to be fit, because he could be absolutely the best player we have in the back line. But there's also a possibility that you decide that you want two playmakers in your team and Carberry goes to fullback and Jordan Larmour is a wing, and you give yourselves option anyway.
What do we think is the peak age for a kicker? You mentioned the whole 31 thing at the moment. You can't compare different sports, but Ian Madigan's the same age as Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang at the moment, who is operating at his peak. They are very dissimilar, but I would have thought that early 30s is actually where you're at your peak as a kicker. We've seen it with Johnny Sexton, World Player of the Year at 31, was he? Was he 30? It was 32 or 33 even when he won World Player of the Year. Perhaps that decade of experience, being a first team player, first choice number 10 for your club, is what you need, and those hours actually clock up, and it is kind of a layer cake of experience, and maybe he's ready to hit his peak right now. I certainly look at the 31 thing and don't say, right, you're on the wind down here whatsoever. I'm looking at it completely the opposite way, in fact. Yeah,
and he's in a really good environment where he's going to be given the opportunity to win that number 10 shirt, and you would really hope that it's not just strength and depth, but you can see him playing a lot of games. Because it was interesting, the other thing that Farrell hasn't officially confirmed that Sexton's going to be the captain at this point. He's he's in a competition like everybody else. So, we need to begin to think about what life might look like post Johnny Sexton's Ireland career, and you can see Ian Madigan playing a lot of games for Ireland, number 10, over the next 3 or 4 years, right?
It will be a stopgap, in fairness, until Joey Carberry fully finds himself in that position. But you'd still have to have a question mark about Joey Carberry's fitness so far, and how fit he can stay, and how many games he can actually play in a given season. That is the big worry you'd have about the future of that shirt. It's probably the big question that Irish rugby faces over the next little while. We've seen a conveyor belt of talent in a vast number of other positions, but in terms of somebody being available who could lace the boots of Johnny Sexton, Carberry's the only guy who looks fit to be able to do that and play at a similar level at times. So that is the big question we have. So hopefully the Madigan thing could be a stopgap, and hopefully we will have a fully fit Carberry for many, many years to come.
We've had a big response to our Cyrus Christie interview. Francie Brady says, isn't it terrible that we live in a country where a guy who wants to represent his Irish heritage is made to feel like this? Aon O'Riordan TD says, depressing listening to Cyrus Christie on Off the Ball talk about experiencing racism while on Ireland duty. Is this us? Is this what players have to put up with? What we all have to put up with? Glad Cyrus and James McLean are calling it out, but we all have to end this poison. Lassa Blank says, poison indeed. As a season ticket holder, I've experienced abuse towards our players and I find it embarrassing. I personally have called stewards over to complain and ask for people to be removed. I know in the heat of the moment people can say things, but still no excuse. Heat of the moment is actually the revelation of character. I think you can argue that what people say in the heat of the moment is who they truly are. And if they're saying that stuff in the heat of the moment, it's the opposite of an excuse. It's a revelation. And in that moment of revelation, we recognise that is in our society and that is in us. And so we just need to talk about it and try and sort it out. Horrified and saddened to hear this is Stephen Walsh. The teacher is worse for allowing this to happen. It's not right at all. I hope you know 99% of Irish people love you playing for Ireland. We're very proud of you. Luke Nixon says, heartbreaking to hear this shit. Us Irish are quick to pat ourselves in the back but slow to condemn ourselves. We have a racist country, even if it's the minority, it's too much. Coleman Hudson says, powerful stuff from Cyrus Christie. Attention needs to be paid. Hope to see him back in green soon. And Brendan says, effing disgusting to know this. I live in Spain. I see it all the time. This boils my blood that we can stoop so low. So that's the lead story on otbsports.com. I'll tell you what we have there for you as well this morning. I was in shock. Cyrus Christie opens up on racist abuse after Irish training. There was actually loads in that interview. He had great stuff about the championship playoff ultimately being decided by a bit of lip pre-match, and it was, we were talking about Michael Jordan, and it seemed like, you know, these are the type of conversations that you want to have with footballers, and his ambitions to nail down a place and to get some regular game time under Scotty Parker next season. But instead we end up talking about this, and I think it's going to dominate the conversation for today, and it has to dominate the conversation because it's such a fundamental issue. Manchester United should pay no more than 80 million for Sancho. Kenny Cunningham has a line in the sand. He doesn't want Man United to go past it. Mick Wallace told me good players can play anywhere. Kevin Doyle getting tactical advice from MEP Mick Wallace. And Dundalk's Champions League trip in doubt as COVID halts Slovenian season. So I think Linfield got a COVID bye yesterday. Maybe Dundalk are hoping that they can get through to the next round, which would be at the Aviva. And he's Eddie Hearn's golden goose. That was Ken Egan talking last night about who Eric Donovan is trying to upset on Friday night. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Deal or No Deal, and we're also going to hear from Micheál Ó Muircheartaigh in the next while.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Looking for a football show with a bit of a twist?
So I know the likes of Griezmann's big into his fashion.
He wanted a lot. One question he actually asked me was, could he make his studs light up when he runs?
Team 33, the football magazine show for the football purists.
Yeah, the Nike Mercurials from 1998, if you just show that boot to an entire generation of people, and they just get instantly nostalgic and remember everything from that era.
The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio. Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
So where do we go? Ideally, where do you see yourself 5-10 years? Where do you want to be? You in Hollywood.
Having worked with really good directors, hopefully. Having worked with the best of the best. I'd be lying if I didn't say I wanted to do that. But I don't know about Hollywood now. But I'd love in 5 years. Yeah, but look, I would love to.
Why not? Why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why have that? And it's the same thing about wanting to be nice and not be blah blah blah. Why not say it? Look, I want to be in Hollywood.
Yeah.
I want to be.
Yeah. Maybe I need to start thinking like that.
Now that the UEFA Champions League has returned, OTB has teamed up with Pepsi Max and Doritos to bring you another brilliant roadshow, but with a difference. Our very own Nathan Murphy will be joined by David Myler.
I just seen Kenny Dalglish out the corner of my eye.
Chris Sutton, Stilian Petrov, Neil Lennon and Jason McAteer.
You could keep a squad of 20, 22, 23 players happy.
For a very special remote roadshow. It can only be experienced by picking up our special code to view over Zoom, so keep your eyes peeled on how to win on our social channels. Pepsi Max and Doritos, it's back, get ready. See otbsports.com or search OTB Sports in the App Store for more.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
22 minutes past 9 this morning. You'll have seen another clip there from episode 4 of our new series, Andy Lee Meets. Keep an eye out for the full interview with Peter Coonan, which will be released on our YouTube channel tomorrow. The podcast will be available on the OTB Sports app, and it'll also be aired in full on this Sunday's Off the Ball show. Andy Lee Meets is in association with the all-new Seat Leon, the brand's first fully connected car. Now, we caught up with the legendary GAA broadcaster Micheál Ó Muircheartaigh earlier on this week. He was in fine fettle. Have a look.
OTB AM.
Now, I'm delighted to say Micheál Ó Muircheartaigh is with us this morning on OTB AM. It's ahead of episode 4 of AIB's The Toughest Summer. It's a documentary telling the story of the GAA in the summer of 2020. It's made up of a series of 5 webisodes and a full-length documentary that's going to air on TV in late August. Micheál is part of the 4th webisode. It's going to be available on AIB's YouTube channel from 1 o'clock on Thursday at youtube.com/AIB. You can check out their Twitter, Instagram and Facebook handle is @AIB_GAA. Micheál, can I talk to?
That's the translation of cocooning. Clocharu, which is a very nice sound because clochar means cozy. You know, everything is arranged. You're told you can't do this, you can't do that, you can do such a thing. So it's a good word, really, and I think people have accepted it. I heard about it first in the month of March. That anyone over a certain age, I think the certain age was 70 that time, they would have to cocoon. And then straight away I met a few people from the Gaelic, e clocharu, that's what we say. So I stick with that, clocharu.
Very good. Every day's a school day, it turns out. We have used the time of lockdown and the absence of fresh new sport to look back on the history of sport and to re-examine how we got to where we are today in many different sports. And one of the things that we've been trying to do that we'd like to speak to you about is compare and contrast players from different eras and teams from different eras. I wouldn't say we've got it always right in terms of how you compare one era with another, but I definitely wanted to hear if this is something that you've done yourself, and if you have any way that you might help us just work through how can we compare players from different eras?
Well, you see them. You see things that you never saw before happening. And in a while, you accept that as normal, maybe something else has dropped. But if sport didn't change, it would be very dull, really. What would you look forward to? Teams have new ideas. They have new ways of training and everything. And I have seen major changes. Now, I started broadcasting in 1949. And in those times, up to those times, people had to hold their position. For instance, I saw it written down by a man in charge. There was no such word as manager at the time. There is no reason on earth why the right fullback, that would be number 2, would ever go beyond the 14-yard line or cross the goal or anything. That was his patch. There'd be somebody there to mark and so on. That was prevalent for a long time. Long kicking, not much soloing at all. Nowadays, you know, the cornerback, the number 2, you could see him up in the other end of the field, scoring. Changes happen. Somebody gets an idea. Somebody tries it out. I think there's no better example than the story of the solo run. Now, that wasn't in the game at the beginning. It came in the 20s, when there was a man called Lavin. Lavin was his name, Sean Lavin. He participated in the Olympics for Ireland a few times. He was a sprinter. He was other things as well. He got a ball one day in a match played somewhere down in Mayo. The country wide open in front of him. All were out of position. And he was a 400-yard runner in the Olympics and so on. He saw a wide patch in front of him. I could run through that. And he decided to hop it off his toes into his hand, and nobody said anything. Finished up scoring, it was accepted from then on. Changes come like that, a brainwave somebody has. He thought about using the speed I have when I got ahead of people. So that was an example of one change. I remember when they used to talk about the throw-in from the sideline. Nowadays, it's a kick from the hand. It was for a while a kick from the ground, and so on. There was a time, there was no kicking from the sideline. When the ball went over the sideline, the team that merited the restart, they threw the ball. But it had to be a one-handed throw. You know, if it was two-handed, it would be too much like rugby or soccer. Hands with you. So the GAA said, well, we'll have a one hand. And there were great one-handed throwers. They were so good they had to be banned from scoring from a throw. They used sling around and real athletic. Now, I didn't see it, but I heard of it. It lasted well until the 40s. The slinger, the thrower, and they'd throw it into somebody maybe 40 yards away from them by taking a big swing and letting it off. That change was there for a good while until somebody said maybe it would be better if we kicked it off the ground. And a while later then somebody else said, oh, wouldn't it be a lot better if you kicked it from the hand? And so on. Things keep changing. You know, the players moving around. And in the book, the Dr. Eamon O'Sullivan, he was a wonderful trainer. And he spoke about every person holding their position. There is no reason in God's earth that the number 4 would go anywhere beyond the 14-yard line. He'd deal with who was there. Pass the ball, kick it out, just kick it out as long as you could. They weren't trying to pinpoint it out anyhow, but get it out of this territory. Changes have come, you know, the free taking is different, the catching, brilliant that time. Everybody around the centre of the field there, one object was to win the ball in the air, get it in the air, and then lead it on to somebody else. Nowadays, players go out in midfield with the idea of, we'll stop the other person from catching it. I don't like that, but it is a change that did develop. It's there, it has to be accepted. So change is good, I think. Change is good. And no matter from what source it comes, you can pick something up from other games. And I'm sure that nothing has been picked up from soccer and nothing from the rugby and maybe other games that we never saw in this country. So games keep, if you like, adjusting reacting to ideas people have, the amount of training they do. The more training they do, the more of the pitch they can cover. So it's wonderful to see change, but I'd love if the catching was what it used to be. There was nothing like people like Mick O'Connell, Brian Mullins, Paddy Kennedy, and the one-handed man from Longford, Hannafy. One time he was able to catch the ball above anyone with one hand and protect himself with the other hand. So I would love to see the clean catching, winning of possession, man against man. That's what I really like around the centre field, but it has changed, and some people go out to make sure that the opponent doesn't catch it. You don't have to catch it, but as long as he doesn't catch it, you're playing your part. But change is there, and the free taking and the kicking from the hand and the passing, of course, the hand passing, too much of it maybe, but the hand passing, you know, it wasn't there for a while. And then some people started. It got a lease of life back in the 50s. Antrim came to Croke Park in the 40s as well. And they had a hand-passing game. They played Kerry in the semi-final of the All-Ireland in 1946. And Kerry decided before the game, there's no way they can be stopped unless you foul them. Just the first person to get the ball, foul them, they'd be free against you, but at least would have to be kicked, and there'd be more of a chance of keeping possession and so on. So changes are good for any game, and we look forward to more changes in the years to come. But it's a pity, it's a summer without games, the toughest summer ever. For anyone interested in sport, it's the almighty toughest of all time. But then people accept it. It has hit us. We must do our best to fight against it. People are doing that. Wherever you go, very few people complain about the games aren't on. They say there's reasoning behind this. We hope it won't last too long. We'll be ready when it starts again. And Lacona Day, before the year is out, we are destined to see an All-Ireland final on the 19th of December in Croke Park. It's not the first All-Ireland final to be played on the 19th of December in Croke Park. Going back to the early years, lots of games were played during the month of December. Get them over before Christmas comes and so on, including finals.
Micheál, it's interesting that you talk there about the art of high fielding, because when Ger talks about the comparisons we've been doing of the greats, the midfield position has been one of those. And we've pondered the question, how do you compare someone like Mick O'Connell with somebody like Brian Fenton when the game is so different? Is that something you've ever considered?
Well, the game is so different, but the catching skill is no different to what it was. Brian Fenton is a wonderful fielder of a ball, and he has the gift as well, and Mick O'Connell had it in a split second, even though there are people near them when they win this ball in the air. In a split second, the good player is on his own. He's got away rapidly. If you ever watch Fenton, seconds after having possession, he's on his own and ready to have time to take his next kick. It was the same with Mick O'Connell and other great fielders like Jack O'Shea and people from different counties all over Ireland. They produce great catches, and there's still a great gush of excitement that arises in the crowd once somebody pulls off a great catch, even though you get a free now for catching it. I don't entirely agree with that either.
What we're trying to do is find a language to compare the great Kerry team with the Dublin team. And I'm not sure that we've been able to establish a way of saying one team's better than the other. What are we doing wrong? How could we fix that?
You can never fix things like that. You have people who have their own ideas. They're entitled to have them. Now, the Kerry won the 4 in a row, 1929 to 32. They failed to win the semi-final. They were beaten in Breffni Park by Cavan when they were going for the trying to win through to the final. Cavan beat them with a late goal, the same as Offaly did later. But the 4 years, you know, it's great to win 4. It's better to win 5. It never happened until Jim Gavin and his men, they did it. It can't be taken from them. They did the 5 in a row. And I think it was time for a 5 in a row to be won. The honour went to Dublin. They'll enjoy that, but it's a fresh start for them from now on. But changes are there and changes will come, but comparing them, there was a lot more kicking up to the 50s. From the 50s on, the hand passing came into it more, or the kick passing. In the early defenders just let the ball out the field. There were long kickers. And in the book written by Eamon, the manager that I spoke of earlier, he mentioned, that he preferred full-backs. And the same thing was before them by Dick Fitzgerald. Full-backs would be long kickers. And it baffled me for a long time why he fancied soccer players for the half-back line or for the half-forward line, and that the ball was to be kicked low to those. There was no solo. There was no way of bringing a ball except on the ground. You couldn't run with it under your axle like you could in rugby. So they overcame the plan by having players that would be good at soccer in the half-forward line. So the half-backs were always instructed, kick it low when you're kicking it beyond midfield, and let the runners that would dribble it in. It was their job to bring it in, to feed it, to the inside men who were destined to get scores. They were the scorers, the centre forwards and the 3 inside players. But the suppliers, all they would do, win the ball, keep it on the ground if you can for a while. That had its day as well until they began to start catching the ball. Again, the change slowly, maybe at times, has been there ever.
It's inevitable that we'll compare eras, I think, just because it's a great conversation point.
Yes, the eras, I think an era ended in the 50s. The 40s now and before that, it was more of a position game. The fullback rarely, if ever, went out the field. I never saw a fullback in those days go beyond the 14-yard line. It was the privilege of the fullback to take the kick out. The goalie's job was to place the ball for the fullback and then stand aside and let me at it. There were different times. But then later on, people began to venture forward. Players that would be anxious to be running and so on. But up to the 50s, people held their positions. From the 50s on, Dublin came in the 50s. Dublin football, you could say, was dead from the 20s to the 50s. They won maybe 5 or 6 All-Irelands in the last decade of the last century. They were the top team. They were good in the 20s. They won 3 in a row, 21, 2, 3. But after winning that, they didn't win an All-Ireland again until 1942. And you could hardly say that it was a Dublin team. There were 2 men from Dingle playing at midfield. And there was another man from Dingle playing against them, playing for Galway. And lots of non-Dublin players. So that's why football was lax in Dublin until the great St. Vincent's team came. They weren't founded till 1930. They were blossoming as the 40s went along. When the 50s came, I don't think enough was made of it ever. They won a National League in 52, beating Cavan, the reigning All-Ireland champions, with 14 Vincent's players and the goalkeeper from Aircore. Now, that was a wonderful achievement. They played with that in the All-Ireland semi-final because they won Leinster as well in 53. They won another league with 14 Vincent men again. Dublin football really was reborn in the 50s and has been alive and kicking well ever since. Thanks be to God. How many capital cities anywhere in the world will you get a particular game, the national game? Gaelic football and hurling now, they're the national games of Ireland, but they really belong to Dublin people now. All Dublin people now are interested in those. That's a good development, that the capital city, the number 1 game in that city is Gaelic football. They're not as good at hurling, but they're coming along as well.
How does the current hype around the Dublin team compare with the hype and the blue wave that followed Kevin Heffernan's dubs?
There was great rivalry in the 50s between Kerry and Dublin. It came later as well. Kerry and Dublin, there's a bond between Kerry and Dublin going a long way back. Even though they play like hell against each other, there's that bond of friendship there ever since. And that goes back to the 1923 All-Ireland final. Dublin qualified and Kerry qualified. And Kerry said, we will not play in that All-Ireland final unless a man called Galley is released. I don't know where he was held, but he was released. They wanted him released. So then the GAA began to make plans to present Dublin with the All-Ireland title and so on. Under Dublin said, we won't play either until Galley is released. And they hadn't a clue who Galley was. They said, we won't play either until he's released. And then he was released and they played the match. And Dublin won the 23 one. But that bond, there's a sort of a bond between Kerry and Dublin ever since. They play like hell against each other, but they enjoy meeting each other and reminiscing about meeting them. That is a good thing. That's a good trend anywhere. So Kerry and Dublin, there was great rivalry always. Kevin Heffernan was the man that I think should get most of the credit. He was the man that led Vincent. He was the man even in primary school. If you look back over all the Evening Herald newspapers, there used to be a full page about the schools, primary schools football. And there was a word there, go out every year, whatever you do, if you're playing against the school from Marino and Dublin, watch Heffo. At that stage, he was famous. He was their captain when they won the All-Ireland 58 and so on. And he was with them. He played Railway Cup when he was only 19 years of age. He was a member of the Vincent's team that won their first in 49. They made it 7 in a row. They lost one. They won another 7. And that built up Dublin, and it's been building and spreading all over the city, thanks be to God, ever since. And comparing them with the Kerry team that went before, the one difference would be the Dublin team that won the 5. There were lots of changes during those years. But basically, it was the same team that won the 4 in a row for Kerry. Very few changes. The odd one coming in, not a mass of them. But they both, they produced great football. They drew the crowds. There was nothing like to rouse this followers from all over the country. Then when Kerry and Dublin, they won 55 and later again in the 70s, 75, and they had many good games. And speaking about Kevin Heffernan, I remember well when Kerry beat Dublin in 75. I got a ring on Monday from a famous parish priest, and he said, he was from Kerry, living in Dublin. He said to me, we must have a meeting to discuss this famous victory that we had over Dublin yesterday. So we agreed to meet. He was rabid Kerry and nothing else. We decided we'd play a game of golf as well. We went out with Clontarf Golf Club. And his object was, we'll talk as we play about the match on Sunday. We went into the clubhouse in Vincent. I noticed a room near us. The entire Dublin team that were beaten the day before, they were in there. And Kevin Heffernan was with them. And I said to the priest at the time, they're already planning for next year. They accept that they were beaten. They were doing it that soon after losing. It might have been the Tuesday now for all, but they were all there, and Kevin Heffernan in the middle of them. We could see it in through a half-open door there. And I said, they are preparing for next year today. And they were. And they had a great victory over Kerry in 6 and 7, 2 in a row. And then when they were going for the 3 in a row, that was the birth of the new Kerry team that won 4 in a row. But there are phases with both of them. it's great to have them there, but it would be better again if there were more teams coming along that had beat both of them and get other teams into a final. But there's a special bond between Kerry and Dublin, and I think that'll last forever.
There was one last thing that we wanted to ask you about, Micheál. Sean Boylan's in the news this week because there was a lovely documentary made about him. It was on TV last week. Pardon me, I don't know if you saw it or not, but a lot of people really enjoyed it. It was a nice, gentle hour. There's been some criticism of the documentary from maybe glossing over how...
I read one, and it certainly went too far. Miles and miles beyond, what would be a good limit. But then people are different, and they view things differently, and it's no harm either. But it was a great range, Sean Boylan. He explained it well during it. He knew nothing. He didn't know any footballers. He didn't know much about the game. He was a hurler who played for 21 years and managed his team as well, the hurling team. And then when he was asked to take over in football, a lot of people in Meath said, well, that's the end of Dublin of Meath football now, if that fella's taken them over. But he proved to be a great leader, and he was a very likeable fellow always. I knew Sean before that. I just meet him off. And, he was great. He wasn't over worried whether he was involved or not until he was asked. But if he was asked to do anything, he'd put his, as John B. Keane in one of his plays wrote, he'd give his almighty best. I think it was Castellan that was told by his father when he belted the table with an ash plant, give them your best, your almighty best. Whoever he was addressing, I don't know, but his almighty best. Sean Boylan always gave his almighty best and a bit more as well. I won't say it was a bit of the devil or anything like that. It was Sean. He was a great character. There were great years. There were great footballers, a lot. Very good footballers, committed, and on their own, they're great fun all of them. They're strong men, rural men, even though they come from the towns and so on. But it was it's time they come again. And they're the one team that I'd give a chance to rattle Dublin and Leinster this year. They might. I'm not saying they will, but they'll certainly give at it if they clash.
It's going to be a fairly unusual championship, whatever happens. But Micheál, it's always great to spend some time in your company. Thanks so much for being so generous with your time again this morning.
Go míle maith agat. Agus go mad míad beor an am seo rich.
I signed for them after the Euros. After my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting what we're doing. Like I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it? OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Phil is here for Deal or No Deal. Phil, you didn't bring your mannequin's head. I'm upset.
No.
There it is. Which one's which?
I know. That mannequin's actually in the building, and somebody genuinely went up to one of the floors in the office and called my name at the mannequin because they saw it over by the window. So that's where the joke comes from. So I decided to take a picture. If I could only train the mannequin to speak, then obviously I could have a stunt double, and I could probably rotate weeks or days off.
Tell me why is the mannequin? What happens? Why does it exist?
I don't even know actually. I must find out. What?
It looks like it's one of those sci-fi movies from the noughties.
Or the actual movie, The Mannequin.
Yeah.
That's kind of what came to mind. That was actually kind of a creepy movie, as creepy as like a mannequin movie can actually be, I guess.
It's the one with Kim Cattrall in it, isn't it?
Yeah, where the guy falls in love with a mannequin.
I haven't quite fallen in love with that mannequin just yet, unless I said it can cover days for me in work.
Nothing wrong with a bit of self-love, Phil. Nothing wrong with a bit of self-love, and we're now down a wormhole that none of us expected on this week's today's edition of Deal or No Deal. We're going to get through this quickly. With Jadon Sancho talk stalling, apparently, Manchester United have been linked with a move. This is how it goes. Deal not going, oh, look over here. Look at Borussia Dortmund. Look what we're doing. We have other friends. You're not the only one that we have friendships with. I mean, obviously, yours is the most important. Anyway, sorry. Ousmane Dembele is available on a possible season-long loan deal. The clubs have had informal discussions. here, listen, will you make it look like we're chatting to Dembele and we'll whatever you want. Yeah, anybody you want us linked with, you go ahead. You tell whoever. That's how this works, right? This is all stuff and nonsense.
Yeah, and there's actually a few similarities in Dembele and Sancho, and the fact that Dortmund signed Dembele for a low enough fee. Within 13 months, they'd sold him to Barcelona. So I think they made nearly 120 million euro profit. So when they saw Barca coming with 130 million, they're like, there you go. This is a guy that played 50 games for Dortmund, and they were able to offload him. Unfortunately for Dembele, as talented as he is, he's only played 9 times this season, so his season's been ravaged by injuries. And a guy that quick that suffers from hamstring problems is never a good sign. United did this in the past, obviously, since Alex Ferguson left. They tried to sign these players on loan. You think of the Falcao deal, didn't work. So have they learnt their lesson? But yeah, it's just a bit, maybe a little bit of a nudge to Sancho to say, yeah, we've got other plans. And
stick the request in there.
Yeah, so, and actually, if you think about Dembele as well, he basically went on strike to get his move from Dortmund. And that's something that hasn't actually really cropped up with Sancho yet, where he seems like a level-headed guy. Obviously, we know he's not too happy at Manchester City, but he hasn't handed in a transfer request. Is that going to be the next twist?
How much of a downgrade would Dembele be instead of Sancho?
Yeah, he would be a downgrade because, as I said, his fitness record is...
If he's fit, say he's fit, say they get, they know we can spool forward, time is a flat circle, and he plays a full season for Manchester United. How good or bad would that be?
I don't think it'd be a bad thing. And, he doesn't have to play every game. If you're going to play him, if we think that Solskjaer is going to stick with the same formation, which he finished the season with the 4-2-3-1, obviously the season is still ongoing for them, but Dembele can obviously play left or right, probably play on the right. What does that mean for Mason Greenwood? Mason Greenwood's still very young, so it's not as if Mason Greenwood has to play every game. And as we've seen in the last game, the game against Copenhagen, some of the United players looked absolutely shattered, and Solskjaer needs to have options. He can't just pick that same 11 the whole time.
Give me a legitimacy rating for that story.
I think I'm kind of going with your theory from the start, where I think maybe 4 or 5.
Okay. We told everybody yesterday that Chelsea have been spooked by the 90 million valuation put on Kai Havertz by Bayer Leverkusen. The Manchester Evening News, always doing their bit, report that Manchester United are considering hijacking that deal. Another one. Where does Havertz fit in better, at Chelsea or at Manchester United?
Well, I'll just touch on the United formation. We think Chelsea are probably going to go with a 4-3-3, and I've kind of seen Havertz playing in the midfield 3, so I think that he'd be more suited to that. But this is the best player Bayer Leverkusen have ever had in their history. That's the opinion of Rudi Völler, who played for Leverkusen. Wasn't a bad player, but he also happens to be the managing director at Leverkusen, and he wants loads of money for him, so obviously he's going to say he's the best. You think of some of the players they've produced down the years. Ballack obviously would be up there, but Havertz is he's quality. So he can play in a midfield 3. He could play in an attacking 3. He did play as a false 9 for Leverkusen, but that's obviously not where you would see his long-term future. So I think he'd be more suited to Chelsea, but whoever gets him is getting a quality player.
Okay. Chelsea have apparently also reportedly submitted a £50 million offer for West Ham and England midfielder Declan Rice. Sky Sports report West Ham sources say a bid of £50 million for Rice would be laughed at. They laugh at your £50 million, and that the player is not for sale. Do we believe that Rice is not for sale?
I think he definitely is. And I just think of that story, 50 million would be huge money if it was West Ham and Republic of Ireland midfielder Declan Rice. But obviously he's an England midfielder now, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of people felt Declan Rice decided to play for England after playing for Ireland but not competitively.
So what's his price?
His price, I think 50 is a good price for a guy that can play midfield and central defence.
So you think that's a good price? Are you buying or selling at 50?
I think if you're selling, you're trying to get more, obviously.
How much?
It may be 60.
So West Ham, you think? Do you realistically think West Ham would take 60 million this season for? I mean, what a crazy market! 60 million for Declan Rice. Is that what you think West Ham would sell at, or do they just keep sitting there and going, well, look at all? I mean, Harry Maguire, he's 80 million. Why is this kid less than that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a theory to that, but obviously it goes back to what we speak about often is that Manchester United always pay over the odds. So this is Chelsea. This is a guy that played youth team with Chelsea, obviously, you know, very good friends with Mason Mount.
And John Terry.
Yeah, so it'd be a good signing for Chelsea. I mean, as I said, you could play him in midfield. You could also play him in central defence, and they need defenders. So it certainly strengthened the Chelsea team. But
give me a legitimacy rating on whether or not Declan Rice is still there on the first day after this transfer window closes.
I think he's going to be at West Ham, though.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
So he's not really for sale.
I mean, if you basically, I don't think so. I think there's no harm in testing, and maybe this is something that can be done later in a different transfer window. It's basically just throwing it out there, getting the feelers out there to see, you know, what will it take to get Declan Rice. But if David Moyes has kept them up and basically needs to be able to build his own team, Declan Rice is part of that. And it was him that started giving Declan Rice game time when in his first stint as manager, David Moyes. So
okay, let's move on. Bayern Munich chief executive Karl-Heinz Rummenigge says that the club is willing to work with any parties who are willing to make fair offers for 29-year-old Spanish midfielder Thiago Alcantara. Liverpool have obviously been linked with him. It is reported that Alcantara wants out and that Liverpool is his preferred destination. It's one of those like love triangles where everybody gets on with it and is actually quite happy about the fact that everybody's getting a little bit.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great signing for Liverpool because he's 29. Obviously, they have a theory or they have a strategy that they don't want to be signing players that old. But at the moment, they haven't brought up the contract negotiations with Gini Wijnaldum, who's been an exceptional player for Liverpool and a fan favourite, you know, a regular starter. He's 29. So does that suggest that they're not going to offer Wijnaldum a new deal? He's got 1 year left. So are they going to say, do you know what, you can go this summer or you can see out your contract? Maybe they say, they sell Wijnaldum this summer and then they bring in Thiago, who gives them a different option. Because at the moment with the Liverpool midfield three, tends to be Fabinho, Henderson and Wijnaldum. And basically the way they play is get you the ball back as quick as possible, give it to the full-backs, give it to the front three. That's all well and good when you don't have the ball, but when you do have the ball, like Liverpool do in a lot of games, sometimes you need a creative spark. Now, Naby Keita was meant to be that. We've seen glimpses, but with Thiago, he's a different player to Keita where, you know, he can see that pass. Keita is a guy that can break lines with dribbling and obviously has the creativity with passes as well, but Thiago would certainly give them an extra dimension, I think. And I don't know many Liverpool fans who wouldn't want Thiago in the starting 11 or certainly in the squad.
Happy to swap him out with Gini though?
That's a tough one. That's a bit of a conundrum because he is a fan favourite and, you know, he's had a brilliant career. I even remember when Keita signed, the general feeling some people thought was that's the end for Wijnaldum, and he's come up with some big goals, but he's just one of those like dogged players that doesn't give the ball away.
Answer me, Phil. Happy to swap him out?
Do you
yes
know
or
what?
No? You can only have one.
I feel dirty, but I think I would say, yeah, get Thiago in.
Come hither eyes at Thiago, that's what you're doing there.
And unfortunately, with Wijnaldum going, then you lose that great chant that the fans have about him.
Now the world knows how Mrs. Egan feels. Spurs have signed midfielder Pierre-Emerick Højbjerg on a 5-year deal from Southampton. What impact will he make?
He'll make the impact Jose wants. This is a ball winner. This is a guy that will add a bit of bite into midfield. Obviously, the Ndombele deal hasn't really worked out, but you look at some of the midfielders that have Harry Winks, Oliver Skipp, I know is still quite young, Fernandes, they're ball players. Højbjerg can play a bit of ball, but he is, the stats show in the Premier League, he's one of the best ball getters or ball winners in midfield.
15 million quid for that's not bad business at all. Yeah. A reminder, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Do you have any, this is a one-word answer I'm looking for, do you have any hope left in Jose Spurs?
No.
The Spurs fans do. That's funny. You talk to the Spurs fans and they're all delighted. It's like, oh no, it's too early. He's just had this, no, enough time. Wait and see. Harry Kane. The Mirror reports that Gareth Bale has no interest in leaving Madrid and will see out the final 2 years of what they say is 600 grand a week. It can't be 600, can it?
It is, but you know what I think?
It can't be 600 grand a week.
Yeah, I think what they do...
What are you talking about? There's no way he's leaving.
But you know what they do? I think somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think with Bale or maybe Real Madrid that he gets a payment twice a year. That's the way they do it.
Oh, it's like a Brinks lorry.
Like you go to your available funds and then you check on it the next day and wow, that is a whopper bank balance you've got.
Do you remember the story of, was it JP at the time, the Rory McIlroy's caddy, after they'd won the end of season thing? So it was obviously £1 million had landed in his bank account after 1 week, and he's like, wow. Gareth Bale's getting 2.4 million a month times 6. 6 2s is 12, 6 4 is 24. It's 14.5 million. Not in your bank account one day, next day you look in, it's 14.5 million. You win the lottery twice a year.
Yeah.
Literally, you win the lottery, and people are saying you should give this up. You play golf and you win the lottery twice a year and you don't even have to work for it. I mean, look, I get Graham Souness's point, but like...
No, I think I definitely get Graham Souness's point.
Would you work if you won the lottery twice a year, every year for 4 or 5 years?
Like,
go to work, Phil.
He's won... Well, look, I'm trying to...
You said if you could get a mannequin to read the sports news for you, you wouldn't go to work.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but if you think about what he's won, right, he's obviously won 4 Champions League titles, 2 La Liga titles since he's gone to Real Madrid, but he's playing less and less a part now. He obviously came off the bench in the 2018 final, scores a couple of goals. You think back to his first season at Real Madrid, he scored that brilliant goal in the Copa del Rey final against Barcelona where he was off the pitch and he came back on, he scored it was a brilliant goal. Scores in the Champions League final against Atletico. So he started well, but yeah, are we going to be reading an interview with Gareth Bale in 15 years where he said, yeah, I regret that I didn't get out when I could, or I didn't push myself, or... I
think that, like, if you're Real Madrid, you should definitely look at cutting your losses and give him half a lottery win twice a year and get somebody else to pick up the rest of the wages and let him go and play football, and everybody's happy. Like, there's definitely a way out of this.
Who wants him, though? Like, Premier League club wouldn't want him.
I think they would.
Would they?
I think that if you could add him to Manchester United, you could add him to Chelsea, you could add him to Spurs. I think you could add him as at Liverpool, and he would be brilliant. He would be absolutely sensational. He's got all of the athletic gifts that you need to be a part of that team, and he doesn't have to play. He plays 25 games a season, and you have insurance against somebody leaving in the next while. Liverpool was at the end of my list there. Arsenal would absolutely take him. And like
former Spurs players joins Arsenal
for Mesut Ozil money. Like, would you rather have Mesut Ozil sitting on the bench, or would you rather have Gareth Bale playing? Right, last one for now. Premier League survivors Aston Villa are being linked with a move for Brentford striker Ollie Watkins and everybody at Brentford, basically. Is he good? Is he a good fit for Villa? And how do you expect the club to fare in their second season in the top flight?
Well, Villa don't score enough goals. Ollie Watkins scored 25 goals in the Championship, 26 if you include the one in the playoff semi-final. So the guy can score goals. Part of that, the BMW as it was known, where Benrahma and Mbeumo and Watkins, and brilliant. Benrahma actually for me would be he's the most impressive of the three, but obviously Watkins is the one that scores all the goals. Dean Smith signed them for Brentford, so this is a deal I think that could get done. And you know, when you think of the goals that they didn't score, obviously Wesley got injured, Samatta didn't really do it for Villa either, so they need goals. I think if they get goals, I still firmly believe Jack Grealish is going to be at Villa next season.
Right.
So I think they'll be all right. I think they'll...
I think there's a good chance too. I think everybody got a little bit frightened by his off-field antics, and that makes him stay at Villa for one more year, calm down, play for England and get the move next year.
And if Villa are a better outfit, then obviously that does his international career a lot more good as well. If he's not playing in a relegation battle, if they're even mid-table winning games where he's creating goals and scoring goals, that can only be a good thing for him as well.
Good stuff, Phil. That is it for Deal or No Deal today.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And that is it for OTB AM this morning. If you haven't got the OTB Sports app yet, go and get it. Search OTB Sports in whichever app store you use, and that's where you can hear our full Cyrus Christie exclusive this morning. It's available for download on our podcasts. Leaders' questions today from 12 on OTB Sports Radio. John Gordon. OTB Gold is Michael Rasmussen, a cyclist, talking about doping. Our Legends interview today is Matt Holland. OTB Gold, Ray Boom Boom Mancini. Ray Boom Boom Mancini, I think, is one of those fighters who has an incredible story where he ends up killing a man in the ring and then having a relationship with the kids of the man he killed in the ring. A phenomenal story, and it's actually, in a weird way, life-affirming. That's on at 6 o'clock tonight on OTB Sports Radio, and then the radio show live from 7 o'clock. Of course, if you missed anything this morning, you can get it back on the OTB AM podcast. It's timestamp free as well. The best place to get it, as ever, is the OTB Sports app. We'll see you tomorrow. Go easy.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. The OTB...